Good evening, and call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bennington.
Here.
Mrs. Eubank. Mrs. Down. Ms. Larimer.
Here.
Mr. Pullman.
Here. Would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, we welcome you to tonight's board meeting. Thank you for being here with us, either here in person or online. We do know that we care about the safety of you and the students and the staff. Outside that door, there's an AED. Exits are to your left or to your right in case there's an emergency. You're located at 140 East Indiana Avenue. And again, we thank you for joining us this evening. At this time, we'll ask for a motion to adopt the proposed agenda.
So moved.
Second, sorry.
Any questions, discussions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Mrs. Downs.
Yes.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes. Okay, we'll go to item number 3, and that would be the recognition. Mr. Hostler?
All right, thank you. Appreciate everybody being here this evening. And what we'd like to do is our Shining Star Award presentation is something that we look forward to each and every time we are able to present it, where we have an opportunity to ask staff who they nominate for this award. And it's wonderful to get the feedback and the comments from staff about so many of our staff members. But we have a very an excellent recipient today, and I know that Mr. Cooper and Mrs. Monheim would like to say a few words to introduce this person. And at this time, we'll step up and ask them to step up. Also, Dr. Glesser as well. So, and as they're lining up, we're very fortunate to have the Griffune Insurance Agency that presents this award, and we're honored to have actually Fritz here, who is somebody who wanted to make sure this was done, and it's wonderful that he's here to be able to hand the award off. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Monheim.
All right. I'm the first Monheim tonight. You all hear the funnier one later. Better speaker. Anyway, I am really honored to say this Shining Star Award for Stacey Bunker. First of all, we want to congratulate her. I want to tell you a little bit about the Shining Star recipient. She's a school psychologist at Perrysburg Junior High and Fort Meigs Elementary, and she is also our assistive tech specialist. This award is only presented twice a year, so this is awesome to an employee who is nominated, again, as Mr. Hostler said, by their colleagues. And this award is then goes to a panel of a cross-section of people across the district, and then they are nominate and come to our winner. And then you already mentioned, so you're stealing some of my things, so I was going to mention the Griffune Insurance Agency also recognizes her with a certificate. But let me tell you and brag about my colleague and friend behind me, Stacey. Stacey goes above and beyond the students and for our teachers at the junior high. She's our school psychologist. First, Stacey is always so well prepared for the ETRs and the IEP meetings. She is very thorough and detailed and runs the meetings with positivity and professionalism. Next, when assisting students, Stacey is so welcoming, kind, and caring. She makes all students feel comfortable in a setting that might cause some anxiety and nervousness. She puts all students at ease and personalizes each setting for specific needs of the students. Stacey will go out of her way to meet the students and get to know them before she sits them down for testing. Stacey is also a team player. Stacey regularly attends team meetings and offers advice and solutions to our teachers. She is a really good listener and is always willing to help solve problems and come up with solutions that benefit students and teachers. Stacey runs our data meetings quarterly, which are really exciting, I'm sure. But she does so much behind the work for that. She spends many hours making those spreadsheets to be accurate and very updated. And it has all of the entire students' scores for math and reading. We call them benchmark data, and I won't give you all the rest of that stuff. I'll skip the progress monitoring, but she does this throughout the year. We make very important decisions based on all of Stacey's important data. Stacey is also part of our BLT team, which is our building leadership team. Stacey shares valuable information at our meetings and is willing to be on subcommittees to help serve our staff. Stacey does not receive compensation for being on the BLT, but it feels it's a very important committee and to share her knowledge and to help when she can. Finally, I, since I have the office right next to her, have the privilege of watching how Stacey handles children. She will comfort a crying child, she will counsel an angry student, and she'll just help all those lost students. Those are usually mine when I'm busy, so she's my second counselor there. Stacey is a Stacey is a very valuable member of our staff who is super deserving of this award. Stacey Bunker.
Good evening. For those of you who don't know, I'm Andrea Glesser. I'm the Director of Special Education for the district. It is an honor for me to have the opportunity to speak to the school board on behalf of Stacey Bunker. I'm not sure if all of you guys know or not, but before I was in pupil services, I was a school psychologist for 12 years. So not only do I have a special affection for our school psychologists, I also have very high expectations for them. And not only does Stacey routinely meet my expectations, but she exceeds them. Stacey is extremely knowledgeable and talented. She does her job with such finesse that she makes it look easy. And I can tell you from experience, it's not that easy. Stacey is well respected by her colleagues, serving as a resource to staff, students, and families. Using her expertise and her experience, Stacey assists teams in analyzing and interpreting information to make database decisions. She takes pride in continuing to grow professionally and consistently rises to the challenge. One example I wanted to share of Stacey's commitment to lifelong learning is evident in her role as the district's assistive technology specialist. This is something Stacey independently sought out additional coursework to obtain her assistive technology certification, which met a huge need for the district. This is an area that changes quickly and requires constant attention to stay up to date. I don't know about you guys, but I can't keep up with technology, so I don't know how Stacey does it. But she does it without being asked and goes above and beyond. So as the Director of Special Education, I'm so proud that Stacey was nominated and selected for this award. It's very well deserved. Congratulations, Stacey.
Good evening, everyone. Board of Education, Mr. Hostler, Mrs. Price. Thanks for letting me come here today. I'm Marjo Cooper. I'm the principal of Fort Meigs Elementary School, and echoing everything that those smarter ladies said with respect to time, I'm honored to be able to be here with Stacey. She is most deserving, and I've told her for the 8 years that I've been on this dark side of being a principal and not a teacher that she is by far the best school psychologist I've ever worked with. She's detailed, she's articulate, she's focused, and she's highly organized. Our staff goes to her, flocks to her for insight, not only just inside of her department, but how to support kids in general. She has a calming influence inside of our meetings, and unfortunately for her office is right next to my office as well, Andrea. So I'm not sure that's a good thing, because I often pick her brain and get ideas on what she would like to do. She's just not only inside of her department, but she sees the big picture, which is a tremendous asset to have. Thank you, Stacey, for what you do. I'm lucky to get to work with you, and I'm sure this district understands how lucky they are to have you. So congratulations. I would like to say inside of her assistive technology, she messes with me in meetings. She changes her cursor constantly to, it could be a Harry Potter, it could be a yellow. She can't just keep the regular black one. She does that because she knows that messes with Marjo Cooper. So congratulations with that as well, Stacey. So most deserving. Come on up.
Congratulations.
So I'm Stacey. I feel so honored just to be recognized with this award, especially since there are so many well-deserving people in this district. I can name all of them, but I'm sure you don't want to be here to hear all of those names because it would be long. But seriously, Perrysburg does an excellent job at hiring some of the best staff around. I am inspired by all of my colleagues at the junior high in Fort Meigs, and being able to collaborate with everyone in the People Services Department helps me be a better school psychologist. Whenever I'm in meetings where we are doing some problem solving, I always say that any good idea I have, I learned from being in other people's meetings and listening to their great ideas. So we learn from each other, we grow together, and we take care of each other. And lucky for me, my offices are right next to the counselors. Being an educator is an emotional job. When we leave work to go home for the day, we often are not leaving work completely, whether it's taking some paperwork home or just thinking about a tough situation that one of our students is going through. The care and commitment that these educators have for students, their families, and this community is what makes Perrysburg a place where I want to work, where I want to be, where I want to live, and where my daughter is going to be going to school. And this award could not have come at a better time for me. I pride myself on being positive, strength-based, and solution-focused, but just the weight of what we have all collectively been experiencing the last few years has been pretty heavy. I, along with some of my colleagues, have questioned whether our efforts to adapt and rise to the occasion are always noticed or appreciated. I just want to say that I am so incredibly thankful to be recognized tonight in this way. This has really helped reaffirm the care that I put into the work that I do. So if anyone has ever been in meetings with me, I always like to start my meetings by saying something positive. And so that's my challenge for each of you to do the same. Start with something positive. When someone does something that impresses you or inspires you, say something to them. Send them that email, give them that understanding smile. This type of encouragement is sometimes all that is needed to turn the day around. And to all of my fellow educators out there, I see you, I hear you, and I want to thank you for your dedication to students. Thank you.
And again, we're just very grateful for the Fritz Griffune Agency that has been a long supporter of the district and certainly recognizing excellence in our staff. And it's something that we really do look forward to, and it's an honor to be a recipient. So just again, Fritz, thank you so much for your support through the years and this evening. So thanks. Next, we'd like to move on to the Fall Athletics State Qualifiers and State Champions. We'd like to recognize we'll begin with Mr. Cookson, Perrysburg High School principal, who's with us this evening.
Good evening, everyone. This is awesome to be here tonight to be able to recognize a phenomenal group of female athletes. Fortunately, this fall, we had a phenomenal athletic season, and I think if the girls here tonight are any testament to that, you'll definitely see why. I had the pleasure of watching these athletes in action throughout the fall, and I know two things. One of them here could definitely outdrive anyone in the audience here. I know the other 7 could definitely outrun anyone in the audience here. So I'm going to introduce the head coaches and give them some time to talk about this special evening and their special athletes. But I do want to thank the coaches as well for all their time and effort and dedication that they give to our program at Perrysburg and also to these girls. So I'm going to start with Mr. Reddick, or Coach Reddick. He's going to talk about his athlete, and I'm sure also give her some special recognition. So Coach Reddick.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cookson. Sydney, if you want to come up and join me at the podium, I want everyone looking at you, not me. So just helps me make myself a little bit more comfortable in front of a mic, okay? You know how that goes. First off, congratulations to the girls cross country team. A celebration of alpha females at the high school, and it's really fun to be here. Just talking about Sydney Deal is so easy. When we started the Golf Awards banquet, it was very easy to go without a script, not only because of Sydney, but our competitors are just such a great group of young ladies. It just rolls right off the tongue. So when we talk about Sydney's year and her record-breaking year, it certainly is easy to remember all of the successes because most often they start with the number one. We played in 8 tournaments this year. There were only 2. That was the Notre Dame tournament and then also the sectional championship where she didn't win medalist. And winning medalist means you placed first. She placed second in those, just a few strokes off the lead. So winning virtually every tournament but 2 in and of itself is an accomplishment. But she rewrote the record books as well. She has the 18-hole record for low at White Pines. She shot a 66 on a par 72 course. She owns the 18-hole season average record at a 69.5, which is subpar. She holds the 9-hole season average, which is a 34.9 below par. The only record that she did not get this year, she earned last year when she shot a 32. She shot a 33 this year. So she has things to accomplish for the next season. She was the Northern Lakes League undefeated champion. No one was close to her this year. She simply dominated the field, was the player of the year in the Northern Lakes League. She was the player of the year in the district. She placed 20th in a tie for 20th at the state championship and just battled. There was a point in the tournament where she was in second place after 10 holes, struggled a little bit, but fought. And as I said, when we had our awards banquet, I think I was the most proud of Sydney, not by when she had all of those successes, but when she battled and showed grit when she was struggling a little bit in the middle of the round, only to finish the last 9 holes of that round at even par. So I just love this young lady's fight. She's such a nice young lady. You would never see that she has tiger blood deep in her veins, but she does. She's an aggressive player. She's fun to watch. She makes everything look so easy. Even those 8-foot putts that make her mom's heart beat a little bit faster than it should, she makes even those look incredibly easy. And she is a wonderful young lady to coach. And despite of all of those records, she's far a much better person than she is a golfer, and she's a pretty tremendous golfer. So she's a sophomore too, by the way, like a lot of underclassmen on the cross-country team. So success is something hopefully we'll enjoy in the seasons to come. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure again to welcome, celebrate, and recognize Sydney Deal.
Thank you for everyone for having me, and thank you for my parents for just always supporting me, and thank you, Coach, too, for everything.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Congratulations to Coach Reddig, to Sydney, obviously, and her parents as well. And Sydney, can't wait to see what you do these next few years. So, our next group that we're going to talk about had a phenomenal year that ended in a tremendous accomplishment. I'm going to let their coach talk about all of those accomplishments, though. I just am really excited. It was our 4th state championship in school history and high school history that these girls accomplished back just over a week ago, I believe. So it was an awesome experience. So I'm going to let Coach Monheim introduce his awesome team here, and also I see a few of his assistant coaches here as well, which I'm sure he'll introduce as well. I just want to say special congratulations to all you ladies and coaches, and also the parents of our runners here this evening. So without further ado, Coach Monheim.
Thank you very much. I would like to first start by thanking the board for this recognition and thanking Superintendent Hostler I say this every year when I'm here, there's no superintendent in the state of Ohio that supports cross country like Superintendent Hostler. He's at every meet, and to have him there a Saturday ago and see his emotion and his actions and love for the team and the school was pretty awesome. So thank you, Superintendent Hostler and Board of Education. Sydney, you look like a cross-country runner to me. So Coach Reddick and I will be talking after this meeting, and we can work out a deal. If you help some of the coaching staff on our side drop our strokes, we'll let you do both sports. You could be like the first ever state champ in 2 sports. So think about it. Think about it. I would also like to thank the staff, administrative staff at Perrysburg High School. Principal, Mr. Cookson, he's a cross-country fan. He came from a high school in Columbus that is incredibly successful at cross-country, and hopefully in the next 3 or 4 years we'll kind of have a resume like the high school he came from. Mr. Jaco and Mr. Henline and the athletic secretary, Veronica Guillen, were key to what took place in the last few weeks of the season. When we qualified for the state meet a Saturday before the state meet, there's so many things that have to get done and be put in place, and they took care of all of it so that we could just coach and go to practice. So we appreciate the support from the school. All right, I'm gonna say a few things. Well, I'm gonna introduce people, and then I'll talk about the season a little bit. We have 48 girls, and there's 8 of them here tonight. But truly, I think any coach that has a good team would recognize the fact that we're good because we're deep, and we can afford an injury or two, a sickness or two, and survive that because we have depth. And the total team effort allows us to really work at practice. It's hard for these girls, when they show up to practice, they have to work, because if they don't, there's 36 girls waiting to take their spot. And it's friendly, but it's competitive. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that there's 48 girls on this team that won a state title, and they're celebrating that as well. So we appreciate all their efforts. We also have a coaching staff. Most cross-country teams, you look at a high school football coaching staff, and there's 30 coaches. It's unbelievable. They're everywhere. I don't know where they come from. In cross-country, there's typically 2 coaches. There's an assistant coach. We're lucky to have 2 volunteer assistant coaches. So we have 4 coaches for 48 athletes, which helps tremendously. And we could not have done this without the help of our assistant coaches. So I'm going to introduce them first. They can come up and start forming a line, I guess, facing the crowd. First up is assistant coach Eddie Osborne. Next, we have assistant coach Steve Slivka. And assistant coach Karen Dolliver. Okay, I will introduce the athletes first. I'll go by grade. So we had 2 freshmen that participated at the state meet. First, Natalie Sanders. She was unbelievable. She finished 25th in the state of Ohio. We projected her to finish around 60th. She was 30 to 40 spots higher than we projected. For anyone that knows the sport of running, she ran a 5K that day in a PR of 18 minutes and 40 seconds, so just under 6-minute pace for 3.1 miles. So Natalie Sanders. She did not just get out of the shower, she just got out of the pool. So our other freshman, I've never seen anything like it from a freshman. She finished 13th in the state of Ohio. I think I did the math and came up with some crazy number of about 3,000 high school runners in the state of Ohio, and she's the 13th best. She ran a PR that day at the state meet of 18 minutes and 26 seconds. And she's someone that in the next 3 years is going to fight to win a state individual title. So freshman Ava Beeks. Okay, move to the sophomores. The next young lady, Sydney Dottlin. In cross country now, it's become high tech. So they wear a little computer chip on their spike. And as they're running the race, there's different checkpoints. And where the state meet was located, they have these big video boards, and you can see at the half mile, at the mile, and so on, where you are. At the mile, Sydney was in 79th place, which we were hoping she'd be between, somewhere in that range, actually. By the end of the race, and she's running against the best girls in the state, she had moved up from 79th to 51st and was a key factor in us winning the state title. Sophomore Sydney Dottlin. A unique thing about cross country is that you have 7 girls that run the race. They take the first 5 on your team and add their score up. So wherever they finish, they take those numbers and add them up, and you want the lowest score, much like golf. See, there's a lot of similarities, Sydney. I mean, you could get used to this. Anna, on that Saturday, she was our 6th girl, so you might say she didn't count. But your 6th and 7th girls do count when they can beat 5th girls or 4th girls from other teams. And to win a state title, you have to do that. So our 6th and 7th girls were able to beat 4th and 5th girls from some of the top teams in the state. She finished 96th. She was about 110th at the mile, so she moved up about 20 spots. And she had her best race of the season. It was very helpful in our state title run. Anna Dalton. Can you guys slide down a little bit? They're getting a little too close to me. Next up, juniors. We have 3 juniors. First, Anna Sophia Gower. She was 74th overall at the state meet. She was 94th at the mile. Taylor, you're only a sophomore. Holy smokes. I have you written down as a junior. Holy smokes. Well, you're going to stay as a junior for right now. Anna Sophia Gower. She was 74th overall. She was 94th at the mile. But the thing I'll remember about Anna Sophia the most was at about 1.75 miles into the race, I was out on a part of the course where only coaches could be, and I was essentially losing my mind because at that point, I knew we had a chance. And running with the girls, thankfully no officials saw me, and I yelled at Anna Sophia, "We can win this whole darn thing, we can win this whole darn," and she looked at me like I was crazy, but she took off. She took off and passed a ton of girls, and it was just an awesome, I'll probably never forget the look in your eyes at that point of the race. But junior, Anna Sophia Gower. Now the reason I thought Taylor Moody was a junior is because she's so mature, right? She is, actually, she is. So Taylor was our 7th girl. So much like Anna, her role was to beat 4th and 5th girls from other teams. Just a few weeks prior, she had set her lifetime best of, she wanted to break 20 minutes all season. And at the state meet on the biggest stage in front of the biggest audience, in the most stressful situation, she shattered her best and ran a 19:51. And she got to experience something that I don't think she felt she was going to experience probably 8 weeks before, when she ran a race on our team. It wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. She was like our 23rd girl that day, and a short 6 weeks later, she was our 7th girl on the team that won a state title. So her perseverance is what I'm most proud of. Sophomore, who I think is a junior, Taylor Moody. Okay, junior, next up. So when you go to the state meet, all teams bring an alternate, and that's an 8th girl that you need to have in the event of sickness, injury, whatever the case may be. We brought an alternate, but I actually think we brought a coach as well. She was unbelievable. She truly took on a coach's role. She was more focused than I think the 7 girls that were running, and Aubrey's nodding her head because she knows that. The day before at the practice, checking things out on the course, just saying the right things to the other girls, being so supportive, calming their nerves. 10, 15 minutes before the race, she was right there with us, and there was nerves, big time nerves. And she just did a great job of filling that role as an alternate. I got to experience some moments on the course with Sophie when she saw me losing my mind, and I think she started to lose her mind in a positive way. But we consider her to be the best alternate in the state, Sophie Smith. Okay, and last up, our only senior, which means we could be back here again, girls. No pressure. Our only senior, she was 5th in the state. That's an incredible feat. Every girl that finishes in the top 10 is a Division I, highly recruited athlete, so she's running with the best. Prior to the meet, she was probably ranked 13th or 14th in the state as an individual. But she got out, and the first checkpoint in the race is around 400 meters. So a quarter mile into the race, she was already in the top 10, and she looked like she was possessed. And she just kept moving up. She ran a 17:59, which is hard to explain. Our school record was 18:22. She broke that a few weeks ago. To break 18 minutes is rare air for a high school girl. She's running way under 6-minute pace. She's been an all-state runner for 3 seasons, which is unbelievable. She's going to be greatly missed, but she's staying local. She's going to run for the University of Toledo, which is a nationally ranked program, and they are getting a steal. Senior Aubrey Duhame. Just a few more things. This is a story about a group of kids that not one time during the course of the season did we mention, let's go win a state championship. It literally never happened. And part of that was because we didn't want to put pressure on them. But truly, we weren't at that level until that particular day. The number 1 ranked team in the state, Loveland, Cincinnati school, we ran them in the first meet of the season. These girls may not even remember that. We ran at the state meet course at a preseason state meet invitational where all the good teams are supposed to show up and try to battle it out and kind of get an idea of where you stand in the state. We finished 3rd that day, but Loveland won the meet and beat us by 100 points. 100 points in cross country is like losing a football game, 35-0. So all season long, they were the team. So the night before the state meet, we never mentioned let's go win a state title. Their goal was to walk off that course as the best team in Perrysburg history, which we had 2 teams that finished 5th a few years back. So they would have been thrilled with 3rd or 4th. We all would have been thrilled with 3rd or 4th. To do what they did was just a testament to, when you go to a state meet, often the teams that do the best are the teams that screw up the least. The teams that just run normal typically do well. But we had 7 girls that ran like lifetime bests all on the same day. And that just never happens. The last thing I'm going to say is I'm not big on like corny emotional quotes and things like that. It's pretty much tell it like it is kind of thing. But the Friday night before the state meet, we're in a hotel in Obetz, Ohio. It was a fine hotel, I must say. And the girls were just so good. We didn't have to chase them in the halls. We didn't have to tell them to get in their rooms, at least I don't think. So at 10:30, I sent them all a text. And I said in this text message, it was real simple. Go to bed, see you at 8 o'clock in the lobby for breakfast, dream big. And I didn't say that I don't know why I said it. Go to sleep and dream, I guess. They took it to heart because the dreaming they did that night was incredible because the dream became a reality soon after they woke up. And it's been 9 days since it occurred, and I don't know about them, but I still look at things. I look at videos and pictures, and I get emotional just looking at it. It was an incredible day. It'll go down in school history, and hopefully something they'll never forget. So thank you, board. We appreciate the support.
Girls cross country team won the state cross country title, the first in school history, and we are joined now in studio by the state champions. John Monheim, the coach. John, introduce us to your team. Introduce us to your state championship team.
Certainly. To the far right there is Aubrey Duhame. She's a senior. We've got Taylor Moody. We've got Anna Sophia Gower. We have Ava Beeks. We have Sydney Doddelin. We have Natalie Sanders. We have Anna Dalton. And we have Sophie Smith.
John, I know you're a history of the cross-country meet buff. You know what it takes to win a state championship. Going into yesterday's meet, did you think you had enough to take home that big trophy?
I I do know that we didn't talk to the girls at all about winning a state meet. It was never something we mentioned all season or even the days leading up to the meet. I thought we could finish as high as 3rd or 4th, and if they had a really special day, something special could happen, but we never put that in their minds. We wanted them to go in without any pressure.
Aubrey, no pressure on you, but you came through with a 5th place finish and you set a new school record. I know after the meet you talked about how you couldn't believe it happened. Now we are 1 day removed. Do you believe it happened now?
Yeah, I believe it happened, but I'm still in shock and I still haven't fully processed it. Even though everyone's been like texting me about it, I still can't believe I ran that fast.
John, a total team effort to win a state championship. A lot of your runners set new personal records yesterday.
Yeah, we actually had 6 lifetime PRs and then 1 season PR. And to do that all on the same day is something that never happens, especially at the state meet. Usually you get 2 or 3 to run well at a state meet, but to have all 7 was the reason we won the state meet.
Aubrey, you're a senior on this team. You're one of the leaders. How proud of you are you of your freshmen, Ava and Natalie, both coming through as 9th graders with big meets to help you guys win the state championship?
I'm extremely proud of Ava and Natalie, and I know that they had a good mentality coming into the race, just like we all did, and they wanted a piece of victory just as much as I did, and I couldn't be prouder of them. They've definitely helped to push me hard throughout the season as well, and I'm excited to see how they'll run in their upcoming high school careers.
Aubrey, tell me about that bus ride back home last night, pulling into Perrysburg with the police escort. What was that like to hear "We Are the Champions" blaring on the bus, knowing that you were returning to the high school as the champs?
It was amazing. It was such a cool feeling driving into the high school parking lot and just seeing so many of my friends from my school running towards the bus. We even had to stop the bus because everyone was just running in front of it. It was an amazing feeling to be surrounded by people who are some of your biggest supporters and care about you and your running career just as much as you do.
John, we know cross country doesn't get the same type of fan support as some of the other sports it does, but you guys had a ton of support not only from the Perrysburg community, but from the entire Northern Lakes League community last night.
Yeah, the Northern Lakes League has been very supportive. Richard Brown is the commissioner, and he's done a great job of preaching sportsmanship in the league. So all the teams support one another. And Anthony Wayne had a boys team there yesterday and a girl there as well. And they were super supportive and they recognized our accomplishment and we recognized theirs. So yeah, we've had great support.
Perrysburg girls cross country team, your state champions. They bring the gold trophy home to Northwest Ohio. Thank you for coming in, ladies. Congratulations.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Next on the agenda, we always like to take a moment on the agenda to recognize staff in playing key roles in what we do. And, you know, we're here celebrating the great things that are happening outside outside the classroom, but we want to recognize the excellence that's happening inside the classroom as well. So at HPI, we have an all-star lineup with our STEM program, one of the top STEM schools in the state of Ohio. And at this time, we have some of our STEM teachers to do the who are you and what do you do? So we'll ask those folks to come up. Ms. Whalen and Mr. Jessing, so welcome. Thanks for taking time this evening.
Hi, thanks. It's really awesome to be here and see, all our students at all different levels and really get a chance to speak to the board for one of my first times and be with everybody here. I'm Ethan Jessing. I'm a first-year teacher at Whole Prairie.
Hi, I'm a lot shorter than Ethan, even with help. So I'm Julia Whalen. This is my 10th year teaching and my 5th year here at Whole Prairie doing STEM. And really quick for the girls, I've had the pleasure of teaching you so many years ago, and I'm just so proud of all of you. So a little bit about what we do at Hull Prairie and some of the responsibilities that Ethan and I have is to try to create a makerspace environment and expectations. And we try to teach 3 core competencies throughout our units. Trying harder than usual. STEM is tricky. It doesn't always come naturally. It is something that it changes quickly. We try to teach them a lot of things. So that grit piece is really important to us there in the lab. Making mistakes and learning from them. We all fail. Like Ethan and I make a bunch of mistakes, and we proudly show those to our students to show like that we're not perfect either. So we like them to see that adults make mistakes, they make mistakes, and it's just part of that learning process that we go through. And just as long as we're trying to focus on learning and getting better, that's the ultimate end goal that we have in the lab, and that collaborate respectfully. I joke with the kids that I would love all of them to be best friends, but I know it's not realistic. And I think that they don't always get a chance to hear that. You know, we say be friends to everybody, and we can be kind and respectful to everybody, but it's okay to learn to disagree with other people. And how do we disagree? How do we say that in a positive way? How do we communicate our ideas with others who don't share the same philosophy as us? And so that's something that we really try to preach in our paper roller coaster unit and our robotics unit as we focus on those teamwork skills. We do a 9-week curriculum for over 800 students in our school. So it is challenging to try to meet all the needs of 800 plus kids throughout the school year. We also create semester exploratory options for students as well. So we see about 120 students each semester for our different exploratory courses, in addition to the students we see in the morning. We meet individually with students for different passion projects, as well as facilitating after-school clubs and organizations.
Yeah, and with all of that, it comes a lot of challenges, of course, right? We can talk about the success that our students have, but truthfully, there are a lot of hurdles when you have that many students and you have that short of a time frame. The first thing, obviously, especially in this post-COVID, or so we're trying to get to, era, is this idea of building teamwork skills, right? And we still have the challenges there with the ever-changing standards and procedures that we need to have in place and in a classroom environment where there's so many different kids and throughout the day, and from different teams and from different wings of our building. One of the other challenges that we just face professionally, especially in our section of the lab, is building that new professional relationship. I, as a first-year teacher, am getting to know Perrysburg in its entirety, as well as the program and the curriculum that we have in place at that school. But honestly, it really has been such a privilege and such a pleasure to do so. So that's been nice, as well as working with the 8 different teams. And if you know the whole Prairie setup, we have the different wings and the different floors, which can sometimes, produce communication challenges. And I really think that we've rose to that challenge to communicate well with the teams to meet all student needs. Again, with that COVID era that we're still in, building that grit and that perseverance is so important with our students. Getting them out from behind their screens and having them back in the class is great. But again, if a student, struggled during the COVID environment, it could be closing the laptop and shutting down for a minute, which, with our pace, that 9-week curriculum that we really try to get through fast, that shutdown moment can be a critical part for us to build that grit and continue them towards a path of success. So again, that short time period can lend challenges, but I think students really understand that our lab is that place to continue to try and push forward to reach success. So it really makes our quarters and our semesters in exploratory very successful in the end.
So within our units, we do 3D printing and laser cutting, and at this point in the school year, 40% of the students at Hull Prairie have received their personalized items that they have designed on their own using Tinkercad and Google Slides. We have launched several new units this year, including paper roller coasters, stop motion animation, and CS First Friends unit. We've started developing courses for next school year as well. We've collaborated with our unit classroom for STEM learning. And improve communication within the community by sending out a STEM newsletter and then trying to be more apparent on social media. The beginning, I had a logo for STEM that was student designed, and then the District Wellness Committee logo was actually designed by a student as well at Hull Prairie last year. We've also nominated students for the National Youth Leadership Forum STEM Foundations program and had a few students attend at BGSU this past summer. So a few things of STEM in action. So we are very fortunate at Hall Prairie to have these writable tables. And they're really fun and engaging for the kids because we can just toss out the markers and they can start and jump in and collaborate right away. So that's a lot of what you're seeing here, is that they're talking through some design ideas and trying to come up with ways to problem solve.
And then, of course, right, we have that different aspect of getting student feedback, one-to-one student feedback that looks a little bit different than what you see in like a core classroom, talking ELA or social studies. We really have to have that design talk happening in the classroom, which is really cultivated by not only the language that we use in the lab, but the expectations that we set forth. So really having those spaces where students can communicate and have those tools right at their disposal to discuss and to make immediate changes has been really helpful. So those tables, once again, those are such cool tables. Accomplished student work, these are just some of the many, many, many things that we see made by hand in our lab that they design through such a rigorous process. And it's incredible to see 5th and 6th graders working at this level. So we see just a couple quick things here. There was a day not too long ago where the internet was out for a short spell. And in our STEM lab, we do use technology very close, and of course, we could not help ourselves but create a new challenge for students. So as simple as something, giving them blocks and giving them a small challenge, they created something that was obviously much bigger than themselves and Mrs. Whalen, as well as right, our 3D printed bookmarks and keychains and project glows that light up, and they paint them by hand. Just again, that crafting and that creativity and really the effort that they put into teamwork projects and individual projects has been really rewarding to see and continues to motivate us to do really cool things in the future and like what we're planning for next year.
So a few things. We do 5 to 6 units within that 9-week time frame. So when Ethan previously mentioned that it's an aggressive pace, it is. You know, we often tell students we'd like to give you more time, but we also know you want to do coding, you want to do robotics, you want to do 3D printing, laser cutting, digital citizenship. So we have to move quickly. Ethan and I share responsibilities in the lab, so instead of just me teaching my class of students these 6 units, we swap them midway through. Ethan is a pro at 3D design and all these other things he's taken on as a first-year teacher, but we see nearly every student in the school in the year. And then next year, we're going to be offering 4 different STEM exploratory classes. So I'll be doing a coding class for 5th graders, and then 6th graders, we're going to level it up with some video game design challenges.
And then next year, I will be offering to my 5th grade students the digital media, which explores creating design logos as well as making stop motion animation, which has certainly proven to be very fun this year. And I'm excited to offer a newer course next year focused on the nature of STEM, which is more of a life science class focused on solar power, growth, maybe some aquaponics, we'll see, but certainly some exciting experiences there as well.
So thank you to the board for letting us get a chance to present tonight. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. This time we'll take a 5-minute break, and students, we know you've got places to go and things to do with studies, so feel free to head on home or where you need to go. So 5-minute break, we'll be back at that.
Congratulations, you guys. Nicely done.
At this time, we encourage public participation in our board meetings, and this is the time we'll ask anybody that's in the audience that would like to speak to the board on any agenda item at this time. Please preface your comments with your name, your address, and your group affiliation. You have 2 minutes to address the board, and please be aware the board will not respond to you at this time. And on the sign-in list, I do see that there is one agenda item that could be addressed at this point. Mrs. Warner, funding? You want to speak to the board? Yep. So you'd be the only one speaking at this time.
I'm the only one speaking, okay.
You have 2 minutes.
Actually, before I start, may I respectfully request an extra 30, 40 seconds for my speech?
Well, you have 2 minutes if things are going along. You might get more than that. But need to have your name, address, and your group affiliation stated up.
Sure. Cam Warner, live on West River in Perrysburg, and I have no group affiliation. I'm a parent of 3 students in the district. So I can have the 2:30. I just don't want to have to talk over your gavel.
You have 2 minutes. We'll see how it's going. Again, if we give everybody 2 minutes and 40 seconds or 3, time to get away from us. So, 2 minutes.
Thank you. An art funding document from the school noted in September, the district spent almost $830,000 on the following: summer school, camps, enrichment opportunities, tutoring, more tutors, gifted teachers, reading and math science coaches, professional development for mental health and home instruction support, and a line item named benefits, and $72,000 to a company called Edmentum. $830,000 of COVID money given to Perrysburg, and not $1 spent on the air quality in any building. All items deal with mental health and curriculum. Why did Perrysburg not spend any art money on air purification when it is listed as a first item of consideration on the U.S. Department of Education's website? An email from the board to me indicated Perrysburg upgraded HPI's air filtration for $65,000, paid out of the permanent improvement funds, not ESSER or ARP funds. Why did the board vote to utilize permanent improvement funds instead of using ESSER money for this? Perrysburg spent $72,000 of ARP funds on a product called Edmentum. Edmentum sounds like a type of curriculum. This company offers SEL products and promotes their partnership with Base Education, which when reviewed is a CASEL-approved platform. What did the school purchase from Edmentum? The handout received noted that a social worker, a student director, a panorama screener, and possibly an equity audit for $90,000, totaling $312,000, are being purchased outside of ARP funds. Where are we getting all this money, and when we don't have $116,000 per the board's email response to me to test all the building's air quality, and $552,000 to install quality air systems in all our buildings? Did Perrysburg take the opportunity to utilize a majority of the COVID funds to advance its investment in CQ SEL learning, thus running out of money to fund a real COVID problem at hand, classroom air quality, so permanent improvement funds were dipped into to make it appear the district did try to address this fundamental community concern? As an informed parent, I fully understand CRT is an ideology, not a curriculum. SEL CQ is the curriculum utilized to promote this ideology. I look forward to your answers to these questions. Thank you for giving me the extra time.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't see anybody else on the list that has an agenda item, but perhaps you did not sign in and you would like to speak to the board on an agenda item at this time? Not seeing anyone? Thank you very much. Okay, board, we'll go on to the next item.
Okay.
Did you want to address the board?
I just was wondering if something is not an agenda item, does someone get to speak?
Yes, later, yes, yes. So public participation will again take place after the board has its meeting. Yep. Okay, superintendent's report, item 6, Mr. Hostler.
All right, thank you. Appreciate the time. So we wanted to just walk through a couple of things, provide an update for the board on ESSER funding and the impact on student learning, gap closing, and student mental health and well-being. So what is ESSER money? We've heard it. It comes in a couple different forms, but in general, Congress, the U.S. Congress, set aside about $13.2 billion of the of $30.75 billion allotted to Education Stabilization Fund through the Coronavirus Aid Relief, which is also known as CARES, for elementary and secondary schools relief fund, and that's where you get ESSER. So you'll see different kinds of, whether it's CARES money or ESSER funds, this is where it originates, which is the U.S. federal government. So the federal government had this money, and then they distribute it to the 50 states using guidelines that they established, and how those dollars need to be spent also was attached to those dollars from the federal government. So let's go through. There's ESSER 1, ESSER 2. It's known as ESSER 3, but it's ARP ESSER. So ESSER 1 was the first amount that arrived, and it was $96,000, and those funds have been spent. The second ESSER is $378,000, and that was fully spent. And then the ARP ESSER total allocation is $851,000, and as of October 31st, we have spent 19.3%. And those funds are, we spend those dollars and we're reimbursed. So they're not sitting in a bank account. It's money that we spend and then we submit and receive reimbursement. And so we'll talk a little bit about the services that we provided. So under ESSER 1, we had an allocation, $17,436, and these were for Zoom and Schoology services that we provided for students during that lockdown. So these funds allow us to go back to those early days in March of 2020, where we could spend funds to help students as we made that transition from face-to-face learning to be to finish the year totally online. Schoology is something that we have available to students in grades 5 through 12. It's our online learning platform for students who are in a one-to-one environment. So students who are in a one-to-one environment in a regular school year, they use Schoology to submit assignments, to receive information about their books, or I'm sorry, about their courses, which often take the place of books. These are things that the teachers set up and students can access 24/7. We didn't have this license for students in those early grades. And so when everything happened, we knew with students being at home, we had to expand a way to deliver those services to those students. Because if we didn't have an online learning platform, how is information shared from the teacher to the students? That would mean photocopying things, dropping off packets, picking up packets. Districts that didn't have an online platform would have to revert to those things. Schoology allowed that to happen through their learning platform. And Zoom is something I think we're all familiar with. Those are licenses that we picked up as we moved into this back in March of 2020. And as we began to move into the following school year, we operated, the Perrysburg Virtual Academy, which serviced at the beginning of the year over 500 students. So the software and licenses that goes into that in that short period of time, because again, if you go back to last year, or the last prior year in March of 2020, we were out for 3 weeks, and the hope was we would be back. And then they extended it that we would be back. And then finally, at the end of that year, we knew we weren't coming back. And then we didn't know what was going to happen that next fall. So that summer, we began to work very hard to provide a full online virtual academy, creating a school essentially out of thin air. So how do we as a district, make that happen? And so the ESSER money that we used, it actually reimbursed us for the expenses that we had to do, to do that. So ESSER 1, safety and supplies, we had allocation of $76,000. And this is for those things that we did for sanitizing, personal protection, and supplies. So what does that mean? So the Clorox 360 machines, you see one being used here on the school bus. These were distributed, purchased throughout the district to make sure that we were cleaning all different kinds of areas in a very quick manner. As students came back to school, we knew we had to be very deliberate with how we were cleaning different areas, from buses to cafeterias to classrooms to locker rooms and everything in between. We also had to order, we also ordered face masks and face shields. And unlike a family that is buying a handful or a box at Rite Aid and bringing them in, I mean, we're talking about 5,600 students having those kinds of things available for them, and also a staff of almost 700, and making sure that they were equipped with all the different kinds of things that they needed. So all these things were happening over in plexiglass stations and increasing the frequency of HVAC filters, sanitizing stations that were freestanding. All of those kinds of things that were done came out of that account. So when you think about the fact we have 8 buildings in play, we have over 5,600 students, and that's a pretty tall order. And at that time, it was very hard to find those supplies. We kind of look back and forget about the scrambling, the ordering, talking to people from around the country, working with consortiums throughout Ohio to try to secure those large numbers that we needed to operate schools. The virtual academy was up and running. We had 6.75 teachers that served a school building, a virtual school building of more than 500. And so these staff members worked as teachers, facilitators, graders, tutors, mentors, and operating that building, in the virtual space. The cost to staff it was that $369,000 to do that. And that was something that we were grateful for the ESSER II funds to be able to reimburse to do that, because at the same time, we were operating all of our buildings throughout that school year. So elementaries were face-to-face 4 days a week, and as Hull Prairie was, and then the other buildings were every other day, and then we transitioned to 4 days a week. Last year, you recall that we had the collaborative day, the virtual day every Monday. And that gave teachers an opportunity to set up and prepare for students that were either online, not with the PVA, but students who were dropping because of being either with COVID or having to quarantine. And so at any given time, teachers had a whole list of individuals who were at home. So how do we connect with those students who are at home and provide them instruction? That day became an important day for those students because teachers were planning for that. Some of the stress that you're hearing about this school year is COVID hasn't gone away. We're still dealing with a number of students that have COVID or who are in and out, but we are back 5 days a week. So that built-in day for staff to allow them to prepare for those students who aren't going to be in that week or for the next 2 weeks. And last year, that number was in the thousands. This year, we've reduced the number of students that are actually out of school, but it is still very disruptive. We're talking about hundreds at a given time. And then being able to reduce that day. So not only are they responsible for all 5 days now, but also for those students that are bouncing in and out. So we're fortunate we're not seeing that as much with the quarantines, the arrangement that we have now. The supplies and materials, these funds were used to purchase computers and accessories to help facilitate online and virtual learning. Students in the K-4 environment in the PVA did not have one-to-one devices, if you remember. And so when we made this switch and we made that decision in July, going into that school year, that we are going to offer an online school, the push to try to secure all the different things that needed to happen to give those K-4 students that online opportunity, and buying those supplies and materials, computers, is another area where these funds were used. As we move into the ESSER III, and this is not only today, but it's also money that we haven't spent. We're allocating funds for moving for the future. After-school tutors, K-12 to be hired later this year and next. ELA and mathematics, instructional coaches working with teachers to help provide instructional pacing, support, and focus on classroom and student learning. And this is to offer teachers those, feedback on data, where their students are, and making sure that pacing that's going on is hitting the right target. We just saw the presentation with cross country, and pacing is very important to be successful in that race. But we also understand that teachers who are dealing with students from a variety of situations, having that extra support to help with that pacing is important. Enrichment opportunities will be provided for teachers for programs that are after school. And this is an important component, money and funds available to teachers who want to run different programs. And these are dollars that'll be allocated for this upcoming school year and next school year. Connecting with students is really important. That's one of the things that we know is over the term of COVID, being away from school, being away from peers, not being able to interact was problematic. And we know that the best thing that we can do is offer these enrichment opportunities for students to come to be engaged in school activities. Families and schools have been apart because of COVID and the nature of how we taught for a year, and bringing those families and schools and students together is important. So when we talk about student-family engagement, and then this is really essential and really leads right into having that tutor as well, because not only do we want to connect with tutors who are going to be working with students, but we also want to connect families with school and making sure students are comfortable with what we're doing every day. We recognized a school psychologist, and if you poll, and Mr. Reddick, who's one of our counselors, and if you poll them and say, you know, what's different about this year, how is it going this year for our students, you understand very quickly that there is just more pressure being placed. Students are feeling more anxious. So how can we connect with families? How can we better connect with these students, not only in the classroom, but outside the classroom? Because that is really important to what we do. Allocation of $15,000, this has not been spent, but we're supporting programs, enrichment activities, technology supported for learning and student connections. I just referred to what are those things that are needed to make those kind of connections by way of supplies and materials. So as teachers have ideas about programs and things they want to do after school, we have $15,000 to be able to offer them ways to provide those services, to provide those kinds of activities for that. And then finally, the purchase services. One of the things that was added for this year was a floating nurse to move from building to building. This is something that is going to support our school buildings, our teachers, and our school nurses. Elementary gifted service teacher to support gifted students, because we're talking about gap closing, but we also understand that we serve students who are gifted, who are accelerated, and we want to make sure that they are being challenged as well. So it's not just focusing on gap closing, that is important, but it's also making sure the students who are accelerated are continuing to do that. K-3 summer school is offered in 2021, and software licenses such as Edmentum that provide intuitive programs with individualized instructional supports. So this is a program, when you think about some of those programs that offer online, it's the same questions for no matter what student ability you have. So if you're somebody who is, you know, advanced and accelerated, and you're sitting next to somebody who is maybe struggling, with a lot of online programs, you get the same questions, whether you need them or not. What's interesting about what Edmentum offers is it recognizes that student's ability, and it changes in an intuitive way the type of questions and the frequency of questions that those students are getting. So if you are a student who is lagging, it sets itself up with its software to provide more and more questions and different activities to help support that learning and really hones in on that. Likewise, if you're a gifted student, it provides you with other types of questions. And this is different than many of the other programs where every student gets the same battery of questions. And that's why Edmentum was selected for the district. So one of the things that we went through very quickly, the kinds of things that we're doing with ESSER funding, the question that a lot of people have is, well, is everybody must be getting the same amount? Because I heard over in this district, they're able to do these things, and this district is doing this program, why in Perrysburg are we doing this and not that? And so I think it's important to take that next step, because the way those funds were allocated based on the federal dollars and how those dollars were allocated to every school district across the United States, there is a dollar amount that is written into a formula based on a couple factors, and we'll talk about those. But I put up here a couple of things, just focusing on ESSER 2 and 3 funds. You'll see a school district like Kalida, which is a small school district. They're getting, when you actually boil it down to how much money of ESSER 1 or ESSER 2 and 3 funding are they getting per pupil from the federal government. And when you boil it down to based on how many students are in that district and divide the dollar amount by that number, it gives you an idea of how much we're really talking about. So Kalida is at $210 per pupil. So that means all the ESSER money that they're getting basically amounts to $210. In Perrysburg, we're at $247 per pupil. So just pause for a moment and think that with all the things that we've described, what can we get for $241 per pupil? How far will that go for gap closing and acceleration and supplies and cleaning? And that's a problem. And when you look at some of the other districts, Kalida, Springboro, Perrysburg, and Mason are actually, if you take the 610 school districts and you list, there's 4 school districts in Ohio that are getting $0. The one that you'd probably recognize, Put-in Bay, Kelly's Island, and Olentangy. Some of one of the larger districts and then some of the smallest. They're getting $0. And then Perrysburg is in the next group of bottom 6 outside of those 4 in the whole state. So what I have here is Ottawa Hills, which, there's, Ottawa Hills is getting $572 per pupil. And you're scratching your head if you live in Northwest Ohio and saying, if this is based on poverty and families that are living in poverty, why is Ottawa Hills at $572 per pupil? Anthony Wayne, which is almost a mirror of Perrysburg in terms of the type of community, is getting $967 per pupil. So this is kind of a challenge as we begin to talk about how these funds were allocated, and what kind of a difference can you really make with the tasks that we're asked to do with ESSER funding. Eastwood is $1,700, Maumee is $2,100 per pupil, Sylvania is $1,200, Washington Local is $3,350. Toledo Public, and you can see $8,432 in the Maritime Academy, which is a charter school, $8,652. So what difference could you make if you had $3,000 to spend per pupil on all the things that we mentioned versus $250? It's significant. So the way that the staff has really identified what are those target areas that we need to improve and really honed in on those things that are going to make a difference for our students with the limited funds we have, I think we've done a great job of actually identifying what we can do. Because when you talk about the amount that other districts are receiving, and going back to the other slide, this line here is the actual number of students who are eligible for Title I, which are students who are actually in poverty. And you can see that Perrysburg is 11.2%, Anthony Wayne is 11.5%, and you can see that these other districts are there, 0.6% in Ottawa Hills. But yet with Ottawa Hills, when you break it down, their students are getting double the funding than what Perrysburg is getting, even though they have 0.6 that are actually living in poverty. So the question is, how did this happen? How did that take place? So one of the things that is part of this is they use this estimate here, and if you go out to the website, to the U.S. Census Bureau, and you look at this estimate, this is the small area income poverty estimates. And what they do here is they estimate the amount of poverty in every community in the country. They don't go out and actually count, but they estimate. And here you can see here, it says qualifying relative error in school district estimates. Please note, qualifying relative error in school district estimates. They're talking about that all statistical estimates contain error. And there's never been a complete census of income and poverty for a school district for every school district in the nation. So clearly, as they look at that, and then that gets sent to Ohio, and then they have to follow the federal government's rules in terms of how they allocate those dollars. But a big part of that is based on this number, which has an estimate more poverty in Ottawa Hills than in Perrysburg. So out of the gate, we're in a tough situation. So that calculation is here. It's not an Ohio Department of Education issue. It's not that they've made a mistake. It is this estimate plus what the federal government says the state has to use, and then those two things combine to make this up. And then there's an explanation here of how that works. And so for Perrysburg, the percentage formula is the children, they're looking at ages between 5 and 17. They're estimating that it's 3.69% based on their estimation. And then that's where that number gets, if you look at that number on this website for the Census Bureau, you'll see where Ottawa Hills and many of the wealthier districts, when we think of them that I showed before, are receiving a higher amount, partly because of this calculation. So what do we do about that? Every state in Ohio has been provided, or every state in the nation has been given federal dollars. There is an additional amount that has been set aside for each Department of Education to use at their discretion. In Ohio, what they did is they divided that up by 3. So the Senate received, they said, we would like a share of that. That's going to the Department of Ed, and they have spent that on something that they feel is important. The Ohio House has a third, and then the Ohio Department of Education, which is working with the governor's office, has a third. So right now, there's 2/3 of those funds that are available that have not been allocated. And what we're asking is that a portion of this goes to make districts like Perrysburg and others that are on the bottom of that list, who have 11, 12% poverty, be raised up to a standard so that dollar amount of $240 per pupil can maybe move up to $500, can maybe move up to $900 or $1,000 per pupil, so that we have more money to go back and to further expand those things, to do what many of our district neighbors are doing with those funds. So when you, again, as we talk about this, and what can we do with these funds and the programs and swapping out equipment or all the different kinds of things that you hear about, how, when you're talking about $240, $250 per pupil, what is it that you can do with those funds? Because the cost of COVID and staying open was significant. The cost of running a virtual academy is significant. All these things that we did to get to this point today has pretty much soaked up the funds that we have available. So I just wanted to kind of give an update of where we are. I think probably in the next 3 weeks, we'll know if we're making any progress with the state legislature. So I have been in contact with our reps, not only our reps, but we've also met with key representatives from across Ohio, different chairs in the Senate and the House, and also staff with the governor's office to make this become an issue. So we've really appreciated them listening, and it sounds like they're taking it pretty seriously. We won't know exactly how far we'll go with this, but it would be great to come back next month and report out that we've received additional ESSER money, because I know that would open up our ability to help students in a much greater way. And that's our goal. So we'll open up to any questions that members may have.
Well, I know you've spent a lot of time with the legislature, with the governor, trying to work through this, so that's certainly appreciated. You refer to the gap closing. Is that the same, when you refer to gap closing, is that the same metric that is on the state report card?
So gap closing is a term that shows up, and what it does is it identifies certain types of students and their performance relative to their peers. So that would be one area of gap closing is, you have a group of students and they're underperforming relative to their peers here in the district. We've heard of No Child Left Behind. That was something that President Bush, was able to pass. And in No Child Left Behind, what it did is that really brought that terminology forward. So when President Bush, when they passed that historic legislation, every school district in the country then had to pay attention to those gaps and how it was closing. And then they did one more thing, is that they began to identify different types of groups of students and measure them against the peer students. So, for example, students who are in poverty, special education, students of color, they began to identify how are those students doing relative to the peers, the average. And that's really when there were many, back in the early 2000s, there were many conversations about closing those gaps between all those different groups and making sure that districts were taking strides. School districts' ability to close those gaps is reflected on the state report card. Part of our grade is how well we can identify those students, the state identifies, and how can we provide them with interventions. And when we do that, we get those additional points from the state report card. So gap closing in a general sense means those two different kinds of things. So under the state's eyes, it's those very measured way of closing gaps with those groups. But for us, it's not only that, because that's always in the forefront, but it's also our ability to close, when we do the pre-tests and the tests that are happening at the beginning of the school year, we identify where those students are, what we need to do to catch them up, or accelerate them, because if they're accelerated, we're also paying attention to that. Those are the kinds of things that we're looking at, Yeah,
that's why I ask, because I hear about programs that are going to be designed or have been selected to work on gap closing and bring our students back from how severe, I don't know, but undeniable learning loss due to the environment we just went through that we're still in. I get it. I get where that limited amount of resources that we have needs to go to take care of something like that. We haven't had to talk about the state report card, mercifully, in a couple of years, but it's going to come back. It's not going to go away, and we want to think ahead and be ready for that as well. And then just, again, I guess just to close my thoughts here, I just don't understand how we are getting 2, 3, 4 times less ESSER funding than our peers are within the area, within the state. And it certainly does hurt a lot of conversations as people are looking and saying, look what this district is doing for their teachers, or look what this district is doing for their facilities, and we don't have the ability to do that because we're only getting $247 per pupil on this ESSER funding, which is much lower than, as you talked about, much lower than other districts in our area. I'll stop my whining. You're doing a nice job fighting that fight.
The school district that receives the most amount of ESSER funding is in Trumbull County, which is in northeast Ohio, near the Pennsylvania line. And the district there receives $20,000 per pupil of ESSER funding.
Can you imagine? It doesn't make me feel better.
The district that receives the most is actually a charter school in Cincinnati. Has about 150 to 175 students. They get $25,000 per pupil of ESSER funding. So when you think about where we are, to your point, what is happening now, those students have greater need, clearly, but our students do too, certainly as much or more than many of the districts that are receiving more than we are. So,
in the spring of April, we reported on ESSER funds and the game plan of what we needed to do, and I believe we were told 80% had to come to mental health and 20% to closing that gap, so to speak, summer school, tutors, extracurricular activities with academics. So when you look at the list that was up of May of 21, then the funds that were not there, we had to scale it down, your staff scaled things down for the September 21. I think we're in line with what was required by the federal funds, correct? I mean, 80-20, right? Mm-hmm. So when we hear, Michigan, they can do what they want with what they're doing. They're giving teachers increases in their pay because of COVID. Some schools are dealing with filtration systems because they've got so much money to deal with that. I find it interesting that some school districts are having a meeting with communities. They have so much money. What do you want to do with it? We have a lot of money here too, very grateful for the money, but it's got to come back to the kids, the students. And in order to do that, you have to hire staff, you have to get equipment, programs, computers, all that type of thing. So I look at this list here and what you just put up on the screen, Tom, looks like you stayed with the plan all along. Do we have an idea what additional money it would be if they decide to grant it?
So the amount that, and we're going to hear about the 5-year forecast, and I'll defer to Randy on the calculations here, but we're grateful for the 1.5 million that we received in ESSER money, but that's probably 1/50th or so of our total operating budget. So where other districts, it's a significant amount. So not that we're not grateful, but in terms of how far that money is able to go to our scale. So there's a couple of models, because when we meet with legislators, we just don't want to point out, here's a problem, and you guys fix it. So when we go to meet with them, we bring a solution. And so our solution was to create a new floor where that every district would be at that floor. So we put out a floor of $1,000 per pupil. And that would affect, I think, 103 school districts in Ohio. Of the 610, 103 would see movement up to that floor, including the 4 that are at 0, and then districts like Perrysburg. So that would be an increase of maybe 4 to 5 times what we're receiving now. To do that, though, we would need all of the money allocated to the Ohio Department of Education and the Ohio House. Basically, they would have to agree, this is the amount that we're willing to spend, and we're going to only spend it on this purpose. So I'm not, the conversations have been fruitful. I don't know if there's other things that are going to come back that they want to do with these funds. The Senate, as I mentioned, in the biennium budget, the Senate passed basically these tax accounts for private schools, where money could go in to be spent on private school tuition, and they would receive a tax write-off. That's how the Senate chose to use their third. So that money is off the table, so we don't have access to that. So I would think probably between $1,000 would be the maximum. I think if everything lined up, I think $500 would help probably about 400 schools. And so it's not only ours, but it's also traditional public schools, but it's also charter schools, and it's also ESCs, and so it's not just one. They have to calculate this for all those entities in creating this equitable floor. So
Do you have a time frame of getting back?
We have a call actually with the speaker staff later this week, because it may require some legislation to happen. So we're hoping there's a couple of weeks here where we can try to get this done. The superintendent from Mason and I have been working on this, so they're on the bottom, so they're a few dollars less per pupil than we are. And if you've driven through Mason and Southwest Ohio, very similar to Perrysburg, not the wealthiest community, but a very nice community. But their neighbors like us are very similar to them and getting a very different amount. So we've been working in tandem to pull in other people from across the state. So, yeah.
Anything else, Mr. Hostler, on this?
Yeah, I have I sure hope somebody else has the same question that I do. Going back to your tables, Tom, the first one where it says ESSER 2 and 3 funding calculated per pupil. It's got Ottawa Hills at $5 per pupil.
Yeah, that's a typo. I apologize.
572.
Yeah. It's 572 and 967. So that got left off there. So yeah, my apologies for that.
Waiting for you, Sue.
I really was beginning to lose any confidence in my mathematical capabilities whatsoever. I said, okay, well, awesome. Okay.
Yeah, so the correct number is 572 and 967, and those not $5 and $9. So
They'd be right along.
that would.
It's too bad it isn't $5, because maybe you'd get some more squawking people to help you with your argument. And as a board member representing the community and this type of thing that you're having to fight for us down there, once again, I really appreciate the time and the effort that you're spending and have been spending on this for months now, trying to get this corrected. So thank you for that.
Yeah, about 8 months, right?
Yeah.
And the thing again, I appreciate you keeping us up to date. I mean, this is going on since April. So. Mrs. Downs, anything?
I just am, I'm very supportive of the money that we're spending on the psychological well-being of our students. We heard all last year, my child is struggling, my child hates school, my child is depressed all the time. And those are conditions that we just can't just sit back and say, oh gosh, we're sorry about that. So I think the extra money on the psychologist and the sociologist, I think those dollars well spent. We were at, well, I'll tell this later. But anyway, so I'm just appreciative of what we're doing.
It's interesting. We have a small club that meets here in the Commodore building every other week. It's a Philanthropy Club. So it's a club that we started, and it's a club that I enjoy getting connected with students. And each year, the club, they do a little bit of research and say, we want to raise awareness and money on a particular topic that benefits students. So you recall a few years ago, it was, where they were raising kind of it led into the full experience fund. So before we had the full experience fund, we had a group of students saying, we're thinking about elementary students, and we have the book fair, and everyone gets excited, and they go to the book fair, but those 3 students who are in the classroom that don't go down to the book fair, and they sit there because they don't have the money to enjoy something like that. What can we do to help those students? So it's refreshing to hear our students think about those things and bring them forward. So this year, students, we've been meeting and talking about how do you want to help students today, and it's student-driven. So the group decided at our last meeting that they wanted to do something to help students' mental health and well-being. And so we had a student that reached out to a peer-to-peer mentoring program that University of Michigan does, and she connected and emailed that person, got the manual, so we're setting up a meeting to talk to that person. There's another group that works on training students to work with counselors to help with suicide. Suicide ideation is something that's on the increase across the country, and that's a number that we track. I know you've been presented that number at different programs, so it's something that we look at. Suicide ideation is not a suicide attempt, but it is when a student is talking about suicide, talking about ending their life. Maybe they're not making a plan, but certainly that sets off bells and whistles of all kinds for staff. The students in this small club are saying this is an area that we want to figure out a way to help our fellow classmates. Of all the things that they could be talking about and doing, this is the one this year that they're talking about. So there's no scientific data behind that, other than sitting at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night here in the Commodore on the 3rd floor talking to 12 to 15 students about what they want to change. And this is it for this year. That's their project. So they're going to be raising funds and selecting a program and trying to make a difference. So you're right, Mrs. Downs. It's on everyone's mind, not just adults, but also the children. So.
It's interesting. I went to the Ohio State football game this weekend, and they had a big booth set up. And the big booth was about talk. It said talk. And I said, what's the talk? And they said, well, it's to encourage students to talk when they are experiencing mental health issues. So they were passing out these buttons, and on the scoreboard they had several references to the mental health of the Ohio State students. And they've had a significant increase in suicides at the college level throughout the country. So it's not just Ohio State, just Perrysburg, it seems to be everywhere right now. And that's really scary.
It's interesting. And I don't know if it was you, Mr. Pullman, that shared with me a video clip of Coach Day, the Ohio State football coach, who staffed, who hired 4 psychologists to be part of his football staff, to just work on that piece. And then he went on to explain that as a child, his dad suffered from depression and committed suicide. And so this is something that's really important to him as a person, because he experienced that as a youth, and all these years later, he wants to put things in place to help students. So if it's that important with football, imagine the students that are, going to be on the buses tomorrow morning, how important it is to them. So.
Anything else, Mr. Hostler?
No, that's it. Thank you.
We'll move right along to Treasurer's Report. You got a big report for us today.
No, you stuck with me for a while.
All right.
Are you messing with me? Okay, hang on here. Let's try something else. Okay, there we go. All right. I don't know if it's an indication of where our brains are located, but I talk better when I'm standing up, so. And tough act to follow tonight, right? Our golfer, Sydney, and our cross-country team, talk about emasculating me quite a bit between my golf game and my running. I look at the running times, and they're 6-minute miles, and I'm going, I dream about that these days. I want to do 2 things over the next few minutes. Give you an update on our October financials, and then spend most of my time talking about the 5-year forecast. This is that time of year, normally my favorite time of the year, because we can talk about the forecast, and not necessarily everyone else's favorite time, but that's what we do. And also, I'll warn you, and the board, you haven't had a chance to figure this out yet, but my wife and friends will tell you, don't ever give me a microphone. You just don't know what's going to happen. All right, so let's start with the October financials, and you'll notice the format change. It's putting my stamp, a little more style than different style than what you're used to. But we'll talk a little bit about revenues first through October, and then hit on our spending. The top portion is revenues, and if you look at the left-hand side, that is our revenues compared to budget or forecast. And year to date, we were at almost 45% of projected revenues, and that's right on about where we'd expect. Well, when we look at cash flows in a minute, recognize that the way our money comes into the district, it's not necessarily, it's even. We don't get a paycheck every 2 weeks, right? We'll talk about that. Year over year, which is the really nice numbers, we're almost 10% up on revenues, and the drivers is income tax. Collections are higher. That first payment in July was really big. We're back down to almost normal levels. And then the other part is our public utilities, personal property tax, that is significantly up. So right now our revenues are running about 10% ahead of last year, and certainly that's a good sign. This is probably the most important chart when we talk about the district, because we look at our bank account and our investments, whatever that is, but in the end, we're a cash business, right? We do payroll twice a month. We've got bills that we're paying every week, and so we look at our cash balance and you go, that's a nice chunk of money, and it is. But recognize we get two big checks a year. Almost 70% of our revenue is split between August and February. Now, we get income tax payments quarterly, and we get some state funding in between, but we get 2 big checks a year we have to live on in between time. So at our peak, we were about 25 million cash balance, which is pretty nice. We're down to 15, to be expected. That, you know, if I'm looking at my bank account, I'm going, oh my gosh, right? But we anticipate that. The key is this down here at our low point when we hit January and February, because we're going to live on our savings till then. We get our tax check in February, and then we're back at it. So we're trending exactly where we would expect. We're about 85 cash days, which is, you know, it means that if we had no income, we could operate for 85 days before we'd be out of money. 90 is kind of the place I would like to see, but that's just not realistic right now. But we're looking good. We're trending where we expect to at this point. The key drivers on the revenue side, obviously the levy, the incremental fixed sum levy gives the biggest jump there. We're getting some additional local revenue from being at the 20 mil floor. Sometimes it's a separate discussion, but essentially being at the 20 mil floor means we do get some additional revenue when valuations go up. We're talking about our income tax collections are up, and our personal utility property is up. And some of that personal property we'll talk about in the 5-year forecast being driven by the little bit of rover pipeline that we have. Some general observations: revenue is tracking on board. Income tax is the one really kind of nominally ahead of things, but I expect the income tax to level out. We'll end up still ahead of last year, but I don't think we'll end up at the same level ahead of last year. State funding. We haven't seen the adjustments yet from the formula. We'll see that hopefully in December. So right now, the whole impact of the fair funding plan, we have not seen yet. And finally, I think right now, our revenue just demonstrates our overall financial strength. Pretty great turnaround. You know, the community coming where you were in 2019 or where we were in 2019 today. And as we look at the 5-year forecast in a little bit, I think we got to be pleased on our trends, but there's no room to relax. On the expense side, the number I look at is this bottom. We're at 32.6% of budget. We're 1/3 of the way through the year, so we're tracking right on expense where we expect to be on expenses. We're a little bit 6% over last year. The drivers, salary and benefits are always the big drivers, right? Because that's our biggest, our 80% of our expenses are in our personnel. And the one number that jumps out, just to be aware, you see supplies, 100% more than last year at this time. And that was due mainly because of supply chain issues, where stuff we ordered last year, we didn't get till this year and paid with this year's money. So last year probably, should have been last year's dollars that we're paying here. This sheet just shows year over year on our, again, wages being the biggest thing, the move to 24 pays. Our pays right now, per pay is higher, but that's to be expected, right? Because we're going to take 2 pays and we're going to spread it out over the other 24. By the end of the year, this will all level out. Expenditures, it's going to be personnel is always going to be our driver, right? That's our biggest expense. Purchase services, our next biggest thing, and that, of course, is things like our utilities. Special education is a big driver here on the special services for that. And then, as I mentioned, supply chains impacting our purchases. So, but expenses are tracking as expected. We're right where we expect to be at this point. The funding adjustments we'll see on the revenue side, we'll see on the expense side in December. And one of the things that we've not talked about a lot is that on the personnel side, that our challenges particularly on classified staffing, bus drivers, paraprofessionals, those kind of things, that could impact us on if we have to do some extraordinary things in order to attract people into those positions. Right now, it's a tough job out there getting folks to, just like the whole labor market everywhere, it's impacting us on these jobs. So the last thing I want to show on this, we talk a lot about the ESSER funds. It's almost consuming. But recognize ESSER funds are only one portion of the federal grant funds that we get. So I provided to you here a chart that shows all of our federal and state grants, where we are on the spending, so you get a perspective on what we're managing in the district. Our total allocation in state and federal grants is about $2.5 million, all right? And with the biggest chunk being our IDEA, that's our special education dollars. We would be very, very highly challenged to finance a lot of our special education programs if it wasn't for these IDEA dollars. And the ARP ESSER is the SEGA schedule funds. But so just recognize that our federal and state grants are just a small portion. I mean, the ESSER is just a portion of all of our federal and state grants that we're managing. And also recognize, while it's not insignificant compared to our overall budget, $2.5 million, not giving it away. We want it, but it's important, but it's a fraction of what our overall budget is for the district. And that's a reflection, again, of our wealth and demographics, whether it's income or property value. That's it for the October update. Any questions on any of those numbers? Trying to keep it at a fairly high level for you. And if there's something you want to see, particularly in the updates month to month, let me know. In the financial report, there's a lot more details. If you really want to get into the numbers, they're all there for you, but I'm going to save that for your own private perusal. All right. We good? Okay. All right. Let me switch gears here a little bit. All right. 5-year forecast. Like I said, this is one of my favorite times of the year. I may be the only person that feels that way in this room, right? But this is what we do. Let me, I was going to tell a joke, but I didn't think that would be appropriate. So the audience probably can't see it, but you've got this Dilbert cartoon in there talking about strategic forecasting. Read it at your leisure, but I will tell you this. When I build the forecast, the forecast is built based on what we're trying to do. What is our learning objectives, and not the other way around. So when we build the forecast, we're looking at what our strategy is, and then what are our assumptions, and then the resulting forecast falls out of that, not the other way around. So I'm not trying to match numbers to anything else other than let the numbers fall where they may. The other thing is very important to me in the financial world is my job, well, maybe to count beans, make sure we're in compliance, protect the taxpayers' dollars, make sure that we're being as efficient as we can with the dollars. But in the end, our job is to educate kids, right? The financial resources the community provides us is to educate kids. It's not to count beans. It's not to accumulate wealth. It's to educate kids. I always want to keep that focus with this. So we want to have the resources to do what we want to do. So this first graph, no one can probably read the bottom, but we took a look at the top 10 peers of Perrysburg in the state of Ohio. These are districts that are similar to us in size, wealth, student count, and this is the performance index. So rank order performance index, 11 districts. We're number 2 on this list. I know Tom would only take Brecksville out, but truth in advertising. So if you look at all the districts across 600 something across the state of Ohio that look like us, the top 10, we're performing right up there, above the average of those 10. We're doing a good job educating kids based on this performance index. Now, closer to home, if we look at Wood County, which while they're our neighbors, I don't know any of us would think necessarily they're our peers in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. We're the highest performing district to get on the same index. Okay. The skeptics are going to, and you are going, great, we're educating kids, but, financial guy, you're going, are we getting a good bang for our dollar? What's our return on investment? So this graph is our spending per pupil. Again, that same peer group. Perrysburg Exempted Village School District is second from the bottom. So while we were number 2 on that list in performance, we're the second lowest in spending per pupil. So that tells me we're getting a good return on our investment, right? We're spending less than average, but we're getting above average results. And then finally, against Wood County, we're number 4 on that list, the best performer education-wise, and obviously a very good performer cost-wise. So my overall big picture message is we're doing a good job. We're educating kids. We still got room for improvement. We always have work to do on the financial side, but when we compare ourselves to others, we're doing pretty darn good. That's a technical term. Okay, that's the big picture. That's why we do this. That's why we're here. Now let's get to the meat and potatoes of this. As a reminder, there's 3 reasons why we do the 5-year forecast. The most important one is this conversation right here. The 5-year forecast is our base document for long-term planning and financial discussions. Okay, I use it while I present it twice a year by law. For me personally, I'm in it every day. I'm playing with it, doing what ifs. If we do this, if you look at the number of scenarios I have, if this happens, when we get to negotiations, I'll build in negotiation scenarios into the 5-year forecast. So I'm always looking ahead with that. On a more technical basis, we need this for our District 412 certificate. Just a reminder, we can't sign a contract unless we can say that we have the money to fulfill that contract. So that's the 412 certificate. So when we do negotiations and we have a multi-year contract, I've got to be able to tell the state we've got the money to be able to pay out that contract for 1, 2, 3 years. Okay. And finally, and this is one that unfortunately you've had some fairly recent experience with, the ODE and the state auditor uses to identify at-risk districts. They're going to look at your spending versus deficits and look at, are you at risk? Do we need to step in? Or at least warn you before they step in. And we don't want to go down that road. But the number one issue is the top one. That's why I hope that's where we always have to keep this discussion. A couple other notes on this. A reminder, this forecast is a snapshot in time. It's based on the information I have today, or we have today. So it could easily change, right? If something happens, any number of things could happen, could change the forecast. So it's a snapshot today. We're looking ahead, but recognize that things can change. And it's based on a particular set of assumptions. And that's what I want you to listen for tonight is my assumptions, because the assumptions are what drive the numbers, not the other way around. And if my assumptions are silly, then the forecast is going to be silly. The other thing to recognize, we're doing a 5-year forecast, but what does the state do? They budget on a biennium basis. I think this question came up last month, is how confident is the forecast going to be? Fairly confident the next 2 years. But as I'll talk about here in a little bit, I don't know what the state legislature is going to do in the next biennium budget, and I don't think anyone in this room does. So we're going to make our best estimate, but recognize that things can change on us pretty quickly. And finally, it goes without saying this is a work in progress. I'm asking you to approve it tonight, but recognize we're always working on it. And last thing, the presentation. There are lots of pieces of reference material out there at ODE's website for public want to get into a 5-year forecast. You can go in and look at the 5-year forecast in every school district in the state of Ohio and their assumptions. And frankly, when I got called, hey, would you be interested in coming to Perrysburg? What's the first thing I did? I go to ODE and look at the 5-year forecast. Then I Google the news. Okay? All right, so 5-year forecast. There it is, folks. Read it and weep, right? Okay, you can't read that, that's okay. That document there is actually what we submit. That one page is what is submitted to the state as our 5-year forecast. We have to submit a set of assumptions that go with it as a separate document. But let me break this thing down in more detail. And I'm pulling, all I've done is clipped right from the document, so there's no editing. So the green is our revenue over the next 5 years. The red is the expenses. kind of the gray line is our year-over-year surplus or deficit, and then the first blue line is our end-of-year cash balance. And so I like to start with the bottom line is, where are we 5 years from now? I'm looking at a cash balance about less than $21 million. We're at, which sounds pretty good, but I'm going to be worried if we're that far. And I look up and I say positive surplus in 2022, positive surplus in 2023, 2024. Then we start getting to deficit spending in 25 and 26. Now, if I didn't know anything else, I'd going, whoa. But this particular scenario shows what happens to that incremental levy when it expires. So we'll get some revenue in 2025 from it. It'll be completely gone by 2026. So this shows what happens. We can't assume the levy is going to be renewed. First of all, we don't know what we want to renew, but we can't assume that it will be. So if nothing happens, we don't renew anything, we're looking at deficit spending of about $12 million. Now, none of us, again, that's 5 years out, right? Do I know what that's going to be exactly 12? It's probably the right order of magnitude, but what's the range? So if I look at this again, if the levy is renewed at our current funding, not necessarily additional money, we're still having surpluses out in 2026, but the surplus is getting less and less each year, and that's what you'd expect, right? Because we're not adding new additional monies, but expenses will be going up. So looks good. We got some time, and we'll talk about the end, what I think that ramifications are those last 2 years, and there's things that we already know.
Can we speak to that? Interesting enough, how people use deficit spending as being, we're not spending money wisely, and I think that's not true. If you look at, when I go out and look at ODE and look at the school districts in our area who have a 5-year forecast, it seems to me a large amount of schools have a deficit spending years 5 and 6, 4, 5, and 6, maybe sometimes.
It's important because the way our funding is, it's a hockey stick. You pass new money, you're positive, and then over time, you're not adding new money, right? But your expenses are going up. So you're going to, at some point in time, you're going to have to go to deficit. So what you try to do is build a cash balance that you can handle deficit spending if you get there. Now, in our case, we got some really, in my mind, positive challenges that should allow us to continue to be financially secure, but deal with some of our other issues. And we'll talk, a spoiler alert, it's called growth.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. Growth is going to be the theme going forward. So again, you've seen the cash flow chart. That's my bottom line concern. Really, in the end, I got to be able to pay the bills. Got to pay staff. As much as we love working here, I don't know how staff's going to show up if we don't pay them, right? That's just
right.
And unfortunately, and I have not had to do this. I know treasurers will delay paying bills because of cash flow. I got to make payroll first. The utility bill may have to wait, just like we do if you were tight on your home budget. But my plan and our hope is not to ever get there, right? Okay, so let's talk about revenue first. Revenue this year, high level of confidence. Revenue next year, high level of confidence, but going out, the level of confidence is going to drop. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the main lines. There's a lot of numbers here, so let me start with the most important line, and that is our general property tax. Well, let me start with this slide first. These two bars show us the breakdown of our revenue. The blue is local real estate. And our local real estate is driven by residential primarily. We have some commercial, but as a percentage, it's relatively small. State funding is the next piece, so that's why that's a question. And the gray area is our income tax. This bar chart shows growth in revenue, primarily because we still have the incremental levy, and we'll have some valuation increases until 25, 26, and the orange piece represents what happens if we don't replace the current incremental levy. So we're good, then we'll see a significant drop. And if you look down here, the year-over-year increase, you see this going from like 9.6% up to 11% increase. That's going to be state funding's impact, and I'll show you that here in a minute. And then kind of level off at a more normal rate. So, general property tax, our most important revenue source. Local taxpayers, right? This is the generosity of the constituents of this district. Right now, 57% of our revenue is coming from local property taxes. In 2026, that's going to be up to almost 63%. That's where the growth in revenue is going to need to come from. And again, the orange piece is the impact if we do not replace or choose not to replace, try to replace that levy out in 25 and 26. And I use the word choice, right? It'll be a choice when we get there. The drivers, I've already mentioned this, the fixed sum incremental levy is the biggest driver, and we are seeing some impacts of valuations because we're at the 20 mil floor. I talked about assumptions. This is where my assumptions are driving these numbers, and that's why this is an important part to hear. I am assuming, for example, new construction in Perrysburg School District is going to be about 1.2 to 1.5% of the total base, which means $12, $13, $14 million a year in new construction, primarily residential. That's where our trend has been. So that's about where we've been over the last 5 years. And then I'm assuming that in FY23, we're up for a reappraisal year in Wood County, and that we'll see an 11.25% valuation increase. Again, that looks right based on recent history. We just had a triennium update last year in 2020. This is the reappraisal year. Easy for me to say. So healthy revenue from this growth. Our taxpayers are going to, are seeing the burden of primarily funding this school, and that's not going to change. The state, we'll see here in a minute, the state formula, there's some help, but that's not where we're going to get our biggest dollars. Unrestricted grants and aid, this is the state funding piece. This is our second biggest portion of our funding. First of all, you notice we're up here, and this year we're seeing a significant drop. That is because of the fair funding plan. They go, oh no, we're losing revenue. It's true, but there's an offset on expenses at the other end. So the net impact on this does not hurt the district. It's just that the way they're going to fund it, we're not going to get as much money in, but we don't have as much money going out either. And then you see a nice steady increase in state funding, about 7. Now we dropped down a little bit in funding. This is where the next big assumption comes in. The driver on our funding is enrollment. If the state keeps the fair funding plan in position and funds it, and Perrysburg gets its fair share out of that, and is not capped, that means if you're capped, you're entitled to a certain amount, but you're given less than that. And I've not assumed that we're getting 100%, by the way. I'm being conservative with this, that they're going to fund some portion of it. But if our enrollment grows as we expect it, so enrollment growth about 2% a year, that this level of enrollment growth outpaces our valuation growth. What that means is because of our property values going up, that would say we're getting wealthier and we should get less state aid, but our enrollment's going to grow faster than the valuation. So guess what, state? Based on the formula, we should be funded at a higher level. And that's a key assumption. Another thing, I'm assuming no change in categoricals. That means that our special education breakdown, the number in each of the special education categories doesn't change, and that we don't see a significant change in low income, that we'll keep about the same levels we are now. And again, I've already said this, that the fair funding formula remains in place, and the fair funding plan is funded at its current phase-in rates.
Could I interrupt here?
Yeah.
With a question. On the slide before, you showed that our state funding is going down, but we're not to worry because our expenditures are going down also.
Yeah, what you'll see when we get...
Can you explain what do we not have to spend next year that we had to spend last year?
Yeah. So remember well, we weren't really on a formula, but the way it worked was if you had X amount of students who lived in your district, not necessarily attend, but lived in your district, you were funded on those net number of students, okay? So then let's say you had, I'm gonna pick a round number, 6,000 students lived in the district. So we have state revenue for that. On the expense side, if 400 left, you'd have expense money that went with them. So we would get, Tom, what were we funded per $1,500, $1,800, $1,500 a student. So the state would give us $1,500 a student, fund us, but with 400 students left, $6,000 per student would go with them. So that's the offset
So
in
you
that
know,
purchase service.
on those reports right now, the state reports, and Randy's done a great job of covering it, but if you go out and you pull, you'll see all the deductions with all the schools that are getting Perrysburg dollars and how much they're getting.
They're getting local taxpayer dollars.
Well, they're getting, not technically, so they're getting the state. So what the state does is let's say we have 5,700 students in the district, and they calculate $1,500 times the 5,700 students. But what we do now is we count the additional 300 students that go to private and charter schools that get state money. And that's shown in that chart before we go off. See the dip there, that right there?
Uh-huh.
So when the formula is fully funded, that is going to be paid for by the state. It's not going to come off of our books. The state is going to pay for the Perrysburg kids who go to the charter school. So when that transaction happens, we're no longer being deducted those dollars because it's artificial. The state funds us at this level, but there's 200 kids, 300 kids that don't go here. And the state deducts from their funding that is here and sends that to those charter and private schools. And then we get that deduction. So when the formula happens, we're only going to get funded for the students who are actually here in our district. So they're not going to count students who are going to the Toledo School of the Arts. They're going to just count Perrysburg kids.
And those dollars, the state will send those dollars directly to the Toledo School of Arts.
But correction to your question, there local dollars are, if we get $1,500 from the state and $6,000 that leave us, that's got to come from somewhere, right? So you can argue that, so our state funding is reduced by that $6,000. So in essence, we have local money leaving, but it's more of a semantics at this point. But the bottom line is you get $1,500 and $6,000 leaves, there's something out of balance. This corrects that and funds those students directly.
Okay, thank you.
Does that include College Credit Plus?
No.
College Credit Plus will show, we're still going to pay that, okay? And I'll show that.
The taxpayers.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
And
a
then
purchase service that.
Community schools, open enrollment, that John Peterson scholarship,
Yep.
that's all
Yep.
directly paid, like you said earlier.
Different bucket now.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So again, 16% of our total revenue. It's an important area. And this is Mr. Hostler's work with the fair funding plan, school funding plan. That we got to continue. And that dialogue, and I'll be really candid here with Mr. Cupp term limiting out. We've lost a huge ally in the legislature, and it's going to be a tough fight in the next biennium to keep this in place. Income tax. The vision in this community to pass the income tax is pretty incredible to me. Nothing major expected, just continued growth. We have a peak here this year, but notice last year that peak is somewhat a correction from the COVID delays in the collection and the disbursement of income tax. But I assume that Perrysburg is continuing to grow like it is, slow and steady. About a 4% increase, and it's been a little over, slightly less than what we've seen, but I think it's based on historical, I would be remiss to go any lower than that, because then I kind of be sandbagging the numbers a little bit. So we expect that modest income growth will continue in this community, and the district will benefit that from an income tax line. Public personal property. This is a little bit tricky. This one, again, is impacted by potential levy renewal. You see the orange bar. We have significant growth, and it's mostly just the valuation of public utilities. That's power lines, substations, pipeline. So I'm expecting to continue to grow at market levels. Now, the key assumption here is there's no significant change in pipeline valuations from where they are now. Now, we don't have a huge chunk of the Rover pipeline in the district, but we have some, and they're already pushing to devalue more. And this is, again, one of these battles that I can tell you treasurers across the state are working very hard with the taxing, with the county auditors, and we're fighting this with these pipeline companies. What they want, they made promises when they built these pipelines across the state. And then once they built the pipeline, they said, oh, they're really not worth this much, let's devalue it. And what ends up happening is these promised dollars that are going to school districts are not going to materialize, and even worse, potentially districts are going to have to pay refunds back. And I can tell you where the refunds are going. They're going to Texas. My mind is it's textbooks for Ohio kids or profits for Texas shareholders. That's why we're going to battle this one. It's not a huge dollar for Perrysburg, but it's kind of the principle of it at this point.
Isn't there a bill? When we were down at conference, I noticed that a lot of people went over to the State House to testify again, and it was something about this valuation. It was, I don't know how I missed it. Do you know what I'm talking about, Randy?
Yes, in fact, I'm testifying tomorrow on that.
Well, God bless you. Thank you.
It's House Bill 126. I should have mentioned it back in the property tax. I'm not going to mention the name. Most of you know the person who's been driving it, but there's been a push for, this is the third time, to try to change the board revision process to either make school boards have to act on any challenge that the district wants to make against the board revision valuation, or the latest amendment is not allow school districts to have a voice in it at all. What does that mean practically? And it means that I have a business in town, and I think the property is overvalued. I can file a complaint with the board of revision, say, hey, devalue my property. It's not worth this much. And if it's big enough, we as a school district are going to probably want to do a counter complaint to say, look, it's fair. And because if they get the devaluation, we may lose a little bit of money, but more likely what's going to happen is the residential taxpayers will pick up that burden because we're at the 20 mil floor, so there's not going to be a change in our revenue, but who's paying it makes a difference. So they want to take us out of that loop. And most districts in the state authorize the superintendent and or the treasurer to file complaints or counter complaints on their behalf, obviously with the knowledge of the school board. But one of the things they want to do is make the school board vote on every one. In my mind, that politicizes this, right? If Eric's neighbor files the complaint, he's put in a position of a difficult decision, whereas if Tom and I are making that decision with consulting you, we're looking as a business. Is it worth it to complain or try to counter complaint? The other thing that happens is, and this is the case that happens most of the time, we look at real property sales. And I've had this experience where property sold for $12 million, it was only valued at $1.5 million. So we file a complaint, if it's sold at $12 million, it must be worth more than $1.5 million. And that's where the district can come in proactively. The other thing that happens these days is a LLC transfer, where it looks like a $0 transfer of property, and they do that to hide the value from the. So those are kind of things. So long answer, Sue, that every time I think this House bill has gone away, it's like a cockroach. It just comes back up. That was pretty crude. I apologize for that.
But the visual is great. I get it. I just don't understand the logic of this bill.
Our mantra to the Senate Ways and Means community, I can tell you in my testimony, one of the first things out of my mouth is I'm going to say is, this is a solution looking for a problem. The board revision process works today. It's not perfect. It works. And I can tell you, in my previous district, we filed 7 complaints and counter complaints. None of them made it to the board of revision because it facilitated discussion with us and the property owner, and we came to some mutual agreement that was a win-win for both. The process works, but there's a few people out there who want to take that. We don't have many things we can do to protect our revenue, right? The taxpayers vote for these levies, then I feel like it's our job to protect those resources for our students. And that's why I'm going to testify tomorrow. So anyway, I'm kind of passionate about that one.
I hit a button.
Okay, last one, restricted grants and aid. So remember, our biggest bucket from the state is unrestricted. We can spend it any way we want. Restricted grants and aid, we have to spend a particular line item. And it's not a huge percentage for us, but I wanted to show it because of the big jump next year. And that big jump is very simply that wellness dollars that were funded outside the formula are now restricted inside the formula. And you'll see that when we get to expenses, that we have some personnel costs that we use outside the formula from the wellness dollars that will come into the 5-year forecast because they'll be general fund dollars. They'll be restricted, but they're still within the general fund. And there's other categories in there is gifted. We'll get some more gifted funding. That's a good thing. And some more transportation funding. Again, does it solve all our issues? No, but guess what? I'll take, you drop a penny, I'm not proud, I'll pick it up, right? So, revenue drivers, I already mentioned this. The Fair Funding Plan is providing success and wellness dollars. CTE, by the way, is a career tech. We don't get a whole lot of that. There's a little bit of English language learning dollars. We'll see most of our dollars in success, gifted. And they reallocated how they do catastrophic costs. That's a special education thing where in the spring, we will go into the state and say, we had these students cost us more than $30,000 for their needs, and then we'll file application, and the state has sent a little bit bigger bucket of money to help cover some of that catastrophic costs. Last year, it was 27%. So if you had $100,000 in catastrophic costs, you got $27,000. So there's a little bit more money there in that area. But it's only 1% of our total revenue, but it shows up as a jump. That's why I wanted to bring it up. Okay. Revenue is kind of things that happen to us except for when we push ballot issues. The expense side is where we, if you will, that's where we have, I won't say we have more control. I won't say total control. Obviously, we have to educate kids. As you can see from this slide, salaries and benefits are the drivers. Let's just be up front. We are in the people business. It takes teachers and bus drivers, et cetera, to run the district. And we're just kind of showing fairly significant growth, and I'll get into why here in a minute. The jump from this year to next year is just what I talked about. That's that bringing some people who are outside the general fund back into the general fund. And you'll see the levels are higher than previous years. And again, hang on for the punchline on that. Salaries. As a percentage, salaries are going up slightly, not huge. But the drivers are this, and this is the important part of the assumptions. Additional staff due to student enrollment. So enrollment is the punchline. Enrollment's going to help us with our state funding, but with more students, we need more staff. And there's another discussion on that here at the end that there's also, we'll have to make a decision The staffing that we're using ESSER funds for, as Mr. Hostler pointed out, do we continue those programs after we spend our ESSER money? I'm assuming at this point that we will. Now, we may decide that we want to do something else. We'd rather direct our revenue, our expenses somewhere else, or different personnel, or may not do those programs anymore. That'll be a decision that we'll make looking forward. We start talking about our staffing discussions here in the spring. But I'm assuming within our growth that we will take up at least some of those positions. And then any changes in base salaries are just based on historical, right? The steps that teachers get and staff gets, the education changes, those kind of things. But again, the big driver is going to be how much additional staff do we need because of enrollment. Benefits, from 22.7 to 24.4, faster growth in salaries. And if I asked the audience for where do you think the number one driver is, they'd probably get it right and say it's health insurance, right? It's just, that is the big cost item on the benefit side. And we're assuming we're going to have premium increases, but they'll be still less than national average. So we're going to see some significant increases, but it's going to be still single digits. Additional staff obviously is going to drive benefits because if they're full-time staff, we'll offer benefits and plus obviously retirement. But there's no major changes in our benefit offerings at this point. The watch out here, and I want to kind of plant a seed, is our challenges in the labor market. If they don't go, what are we going to do down the road? It's not necessarily a wage issue because we pay well in our classified staff. The question is benefits for part-time folks, okay? Right now we're holding the line on, it's a great place to work, we pay well, we're getting good people, but can we maintain that? And there's been some discussion that's an artifact of COVID. I don't know if you read the employment bulletins that people believe that anymore. I think there's a different expectation in the labor force at this point. Purchase services are our next big item. And Mrs. Downs, this is where you see this negative this year, this drop. That was due to what we were talking about. And we're expecting, 5% growth. And that's just being driven by enrollment. With increased enrollment means more special needs, other special services, transportation costs, et cetera. This is where we see the impact of the Fair Funding Plan on expenses. Special education will continue to be the big driver. Technology demands is also a big one. When we look at things like, I mentioned over here in the assumptions, cybersecurity. That's become a significant expense item. Programs in place to protect the district from bad actors. And I can tell you the cost of cybersecurity insurance, it was fairly reasonable a couple of years ago. It's doubling and tripling if you can get it. The issue we have in school districts, we are not tech companies. We have a very good technical staff, but you all probably with your bank accounts do multi-factor authentication, right? If you go into your bank account and you want to do something, they send you a code and you got to enter that. Well, with a lot of our transactions, we need to get there. We don't have the platforms to build triple, double, well, mostly double, but triple type authentications, and that's where insurance companies want us to be. So cyber is going to be a big deal in this area. I'm assuming inflationary increases in utility costs and that we'll have increased special education demands. Our job in public education is to provide a free and appropriate education for every student. We can't ask, what's the student going to cost us to educate? It doesn't work that way, right? We have a staff that does a good job with IEPs and ETRs to make sure we provide students exactly what they need, but we have no control over what student walks through our door, nor should we, right? So the bottom line, again, revenue growth looks good in my mind. We'll have to talk about the levies out in 25, 26, and and expenses are going to go up, driven primarily by enrollment. If those enrollment numbers don't materialize, then that changes the whole assumptions of the game. So we're financially healthy, right? The district, the board leadership has done a good job getting us to this point today. Broken record, enrollment growth is the key driver. That assumption drives much of what is in this plan. We can't take the revenues for granted. State funding could be impacted. Pipeline money, can't take it for granted. I think we've got reasonable assumptions in there. Now, it also means, and this is always difficult, when you got money in your pocket, what do you want to do with it? You want to spend it, and I understand that, particularly when you've gone without for a while. And one of our challenges is going to be, we got to plan for the rainy day. We got money in our pocket today, but we got to look at 25, 26 and make sure we have a cash balance that's reasonable, not too much, right, whatever that, but reasonable to protect the district going forward and give us time to do some of the things we're going to need to do in the future. And state funding, if you haven't got that message, remains a concern. So this, to me, besides we're being financially healthy, the 5-year forecast looks good. This is my chance to pontificate just a little bit more. Key things we need to deal with, the facilities master plan. While it does not necessarily, it does not fit within the 5-year forecast, it does impact some decisions we need to make in the near future. We have a PI levy that's maturing. We're going to need that. If you remember the facilities discussion, those are the kind of dollars we need to replace roofs, parking lots, buy buses, those kind of things. And finally, levy renewal. I can't recommend or would not be able to recommend what we should do with a levy renewal until we have the facilities master plan in place. Based on our growth, we know we're going to need another building. So a building and an operating levy that makes sense together, that's probably where I'm hoping that will end up, assuming that a new building or some kind of additions are we're leaning, okay? So some point in time we'll have to talk about the levy, but we're going to let these other two issues deal with first. And then we'll work on and how it feeds that decision. Don't want to take that decision lightly, but, and fortunately Mrs. Downs gets out of this decision, but we're not looking at, we're not waiting until 2025 to make this decision. You know, I think next year we should have a game plan going forward that looks at what do we need facilities-wise, and then what kind of operating money do we need on top of that. And my plan would be 5-year forecast we have to do, but when we start talking about new levies, we got to try to stretch that out to 10 years or so, just when we look at cash flow and operating. Obviously, the accuracy, the farther out you get, is less, but we're not going to be able to make a decision just on a short 5-year window. And the last thing is debt structure. We are not, fortunately, a heavy indebted district. If you look at the numbers, we have a bond issue that's maturing here in a couple of years, which is nice. And then we have a one that's, you know, we're early in that game, but interest rates continue to be strategic. And I'll kind of foreshadow maybe discussion I'll have the finance committee next month and maybe come here is if the interest rates stay favorable, we may want to look at refunding that one bond issue and save the taxpayers anywhere from $2 to $3 million over the life of that bond. But that's kind of, I'm hoping to be able to pull that trigger in the next couple of months.
I hope you meant refinance, not refund.
Refund is the correct term for
Refund
bonds.
is the correct, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That one I'm familiar with.
Yeah, you refinance your mortgage, you refund a bond.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's how should I put it? We always think of debt we always equate it to our mortgage, right? But, you know, with your mortgage, you are paying typically principal and interest every month, right? You're making the same payment. What you do in a bond issue, your principal payment may change because you have a group of bonds that are due at this date, and you pay those bonds off. So you refund the bonds. So, sorry. Questions on that? I know I went long.
Could you, back to slide 29, you mentioned as well, I've been aware about aides, transportation, bus drivers, cafeteria monitors. Is this where the assumption was built in on 29, the premium increases?
Yeah, and I kind of maybe misspoke. Food service and transportation personnel would not necessarily be in there because they're funded outside the general fund. But you're talking about paraprofessionals, mostly certified staff. That's the people we're talking about. We'll need those others too. With transportation, I take it back. Transportation is within the general fund. I'm thinking food service. So yes, bus drivers would fit in there too.
Thank you.
And obviously, more miles on the bus, so you got those kinds of other expenses. But the personnel costs are the big drivers again. And we've already talked about within the administrative team, if we move certain ESSER programs in there, that's going to impact that number. So if we have 3 personnel that are paying out of ESSER, we're moving into general fund, you're not going to be able to add 10 more staffers. You're going to have to add something less than that.
Well, as you mentioned, the reality is getting folks to work in those positions may take more than what's taking place right now. We don't know that, but something to think about, like you said, make an assumption.
These are all assumptions, right? These numbers fall out of these assumptions. So you can argue with me on enrollment, and you could be right. You can argue with me, on any of those numbers, but they're the assumptions I'm using to base the forecast on at this point. Again, it's a work in progress. We get more information. There's a study going on now on the residential growth in this community, and by some numbers, my 2% growth is too small. Right, but I thought that was a conservative enough number that doesn't really sway it one way or another. Plus or minus 10 students doesn't make a huge difference. Plus or minus 30 students starts to make a significant difference. What other questions do you have?
Well, just on that last point too, we also bring in, Finance Committee also has, a community member that studies this, has for I don't know, as long as I've been on the board, probably longer. So he's well versed in some of those assumptions, and he was in agreement with that as well.
Yeah, and he didn't. I think he thought the numbers were acceptable. So that was a nice external validation of what we were doing.
You're not doing this in a vacuum.
No.
Outstanding, Randy. Thank you.
Again, I apologize for the length of this, but I thought it was important that you see.
Need to know it.
In your attached to the board docs is a separate report on the school funding piece of it. So if you really want to get down the nitty gritty, you really want to have your eyes crossed by the numbers, there's a report for you.
And all these reports are out there right now online for anybody to see in the community and ask questions to us, directly to you as treasurer or superintendent, Mr. Hostler.
And I want to make that point that there should be we're having this discussion when assuming the board approves the forecast, it's no longer my forecast, it's our forecast, right? It's Perrysburg Exempted Village School District forecast. And it's going to be a work in progress. And I welcome if you get questions, I have no problem sitting down with anyone walking through this. They'd probably walk away as, I wish you would shut up, right? But that's why I like talking about this stuff, because it's the one thing I can contribute. I don't get to educate kids, teach trigonometry or chemistry, but I can talk numbers with whoever wants. So.
I would like to just thank you for delineating the assumptions so well. In the past, I don't think we've really understood the assumptions, and I really appreciated your explanations. That was great.
Well, I sat where you guys were for almost 10 years, and it took me a few years to realize what I was actually voting on, right? And I'm a numbers guy. It just because school funding is just completely different than anything else in the world. And but again, anytime you want more, we can sit down with it. And what I'll do is, if there are changes to the forecast, I may end up including that in my financial report. We may not refile it with the state, but if we have some things that we know about are changing, you'll get those updates prior to May when we do this again. So last thing I want to do is have you be surprised in May and I come back and said, oh, those numbers in November were completely wrong. All right? I've not had that experience, but there shouldn't be any surprises, come May.
Thank you very much. Well done. Well, now we have to accept a few of these things. We'll wait for Mr. Drury to get back to his seat so he can check off the votes. We're going to go to item number 7.3. And we'll need a motion to accept the October financial report.
So moved.
Second?
Any questions? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Mrs. Downs.
Yes.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes. Motion carries. We'll go to 7.4. Did you want to speak to that first before we go with the motion?
What number are we on? Oh.
7.4, the amended appropriations.
Yeah, so back in September, you approved that's a terrible name, the permanent appropriations, which they're not really permanent. You're allowed to amend them. And so what I got is an amended appropriation. The biggest change in the appropriation I could tell you is at the time the original appropriation was done, the amount of ESSER funds was unclear. And so the biggest change is that we've updated the appropriation for the ESSER $3. But there's some small ones in there too. And the other thing what happens, I'm going a little lengthy here, but the appropriation then, there's an amended certificate that shows the county auditor that we have enough resources to cover the appropriations.
We have a motion to accept item 7.4, the appropriations.
So move.
Second.
Any other questions from Mr. Drewer on this? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Downs.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes. Motion carries. And item 7.5 would be the 5-year forecast. Again, we'll take a motion for that.
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions or discussion before we call for the vote? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Mrs. Downs.
Yes.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes. Again, motion carries. Thanks again, Mr. Drover. That's excellent. Well done. And I can only say that the reports with graphs and numbers and all the things you specifically spelled out is very helpful. Even to the community, I know that you're very much open to having ask questions, send an email, but the thing that I want to make sure we understand is the word, I think it was 2020 word, the transparency word. It's out there. It's out there now. The discussion's there. You're on tape. The money's out there as far as the 5-year forecast. So,
And I think it's critical. In my experience, we can talk about this every meeting, and people don't always, you didn't talk about it. Well, we are, and I'm committed to make sure it's in front. It's like I talked about that levy that we're going to need to do something before 2025. That's going to be an ongoing conversation. We'll get the facilities plan built, then we'll go from there.
thank you. Yeah, we have board committees. Why don't we just start with Mrs. Larimer, and we'll go around if you want to talk about anything from your committee and operations.
The operations, the notes that James submitted were clear and accurate. Just so you know, at last count, holding our breath, the second floor of the Hack Center is going to be completed in time for our next meeting. So we're going on a field trip, and we're going to have our board meeting at the Hack Center. So that'll be really interesting.
You mean the operations meeting?
The operations meeting, yeah. So that'll be, did I say board meeting? I didn't mean to. Yeah. Well, if he can say states of Ohio, I can say board meeting. So yeah, that'll be something to look forward to.
I'll just add to the operations. With Lila's report, 3,000 meals, 3,000 lunches, 1,000 breakfasts in October. So she's doing something right.
Yeah, and I don't know how she's doing it, because she will actually physically go to Costco or to GFS to try and buy products because none of our supplies are coming in. And it's just, where does she have the time? I don't know how she does this.
Right. And there was a concern about bus drivers too. They were down 4 drivers, and that's something.
Yeah, with a retiree and 2 other leaving, and no sooner get them and they go.
And I want to, again, a broken record here. Food service, the key number is the number of meals served, particularly right now where every meal is being reimbursed by the federal government. So that's a very important piece of this.
Yeah. Mrs. Downs, anything you want to report from your?
Well, I do want to point out, if you look at the chart in the pupil services. And at this point, we're almost 1/4 of the way through the school year. And we have 12, they call them iterations of suicide. Our high was in 2020, it was 44. That's really high, and that's not kids who commit suicide. It's kids who start talking about suicide and send emails around about their outlook on their future and their positive well-being. So this number is very scary to me because it could be our highest year ever. So I think that's something to be careful about.
Can I ask Mrs. Downs, in your meeting, did they identify by counselors or teachers or nurses, or did the kids come forward and?
It's all kinds.
Okay.
All kinds.
Because I know what happens is they say that parents are the last, when someone does take their life, unfortunate situation, the parents are the last ones to, I didn't see any changes. I didn't know. And that's why I'm wondering who's reporting this number, the students?
It's everybody. It's different people noticing different things.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, it's reporting it and then the staff acting on it. So it's not just, oh, here's another one. It is actually the staff then begins to engage with the student, the family, to do something. So to make sure that doesn't happen where the parents are kind of caught flat-footed, so.
I know that when my granddaughter had a friend who was in trouble, she and her friends went to school and talked to the counselors about that. And then the counselors called the parents in. And a lot of work was done with this child. And she's fine and healthy and all is well. But kids go through trauma. They go through stress. And sometimes they don't make the greatest decisions. So it's really an important work that they do.
And I remember Mrs. Reddick speaking to us pre-pandemic, coming to the board meeting, talking to us, and guidance counselors talking to us about the change that they see with the kids, with some of the situations they're faced with the mental illness. And this is something that happened pre-pandemic. Then pandemic came in, and then there's where we're at today.
Then our teaching and learning is tomorrow. So I have nothing to report on that. But I did go to I went to the Schools Foundation. And what an exciting group that is. It's a busy time for them because they have sent out, they're getting good response, and they're sending out their fall mail appeal to 2,800 people. And they work in teams, and the growth is really, they're very excited. They're also very excited that they have 3 new additions to their group. And Dr. Kristen Kaiser is one, Amy Luck is another, and Krista Bolwinski is the 3rd new member. These are young mothers with young children, excited, energetic, and thoughtful. So it was really a great meeting. They would like to stress to us, maybe to the audience who's obviously concerned about school, and that the Tuesday after Thanksgiving is National Giving Tuesday. So if you have not made a donation to the Schools Foundation, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving would be a great time to do that. So, and that's the end of my reports.
Thank you. Mr. Bennington?
I think we've had enough finance for one night. And I was not in attendance at the Penta meeting due to some business travel. I did hear it was a fairly lengthy session, doing some evaluations of administrators.
Thank you. Personnel Committee, You can see there in the notes, the job fair update went pretty well that they had. Also, we're going to be voting on in a consent agenda with the substitutes and being a non-bachelor's teaching license. And other than that, we continue to study salaries and what have you with our staff. So
The substitute teacher change, that's just for the rest of this school year, right?
Correct.
Through 2022, yeah.
anybody else? All right. All right, it takes us then to 11-1. Actually, we're going to take 11 through 14, which would be the consent agenda. And we'll take a motion to accept the consent agenda before we discuss. Is there a motion to accept?
So move.
You second it.
Second.
Okay.
Is there any questions or anything you want to bring up about any item on the consent agenda? Hearing none, well, roll call, please.
Mrs. Downs.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes.
Mr. Pullman, I know resignation was for Sarah Stockwell, who is administrator here in the district, and just want to wish her well as she looks at leaving the district next year. So appreciate all of her service and all that she does, and just want to call attention to that.
Absolutely.
It was outstanding of her for such a position that she has done with that department and what she's done to create that department, that she is giving us this much notice to try, and I don't even know how we can possibly replace her, but fill the spot so that Andrea doesn't lose her mind and think she's got to do it all by herself. But yeah, I just wanted to thank her for that.
She has been an exceptional leader in a very, very difficult time. And all the COVID extra time on everything she's done makes her job really, really difficult.
Yeah, I consider her a pioneer on a lot of the things that she's initiated.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that the administration would like to have seen completed for the students' sake. You think back when she first started here and the things she brought to our attention as a board, and we appreciate everything she's done.
Yeah, absolute leader with a heart in the right place and a toughness and an honesty that position really needed. And I agree, it'll be tough to fill that role in the way that she did
She
it.
always did it with a smile,
Yeah.
too.
You know, I think we're on board discussion now, but reading the article today about school nurses, and it was not a local nurse who was interviewed in the Toledo Blade. I don't know if you saw the article, but that's what makes me nervous about the workers we have in our own school district are getting beat up by COVID. And the school nurse actually left her job, I think it was New Jersey, was where she was from, and she talked about some of the same issues that we're experiencing here. And the number one thing was not so much, it wasn't the kids, it wasn't the COVID as much as that when they had to call home and say, your child's been exposed to a positive, now they had to be quarantined. That type of thing bothered them because of the response they received on the other end, which is sad. And we talk about, and we've talked a lot about the respect concept, and our people are getting beat up because of that. Right down to the school nurse who's had a very tough job before COVID doing their jobs. And so working with the school personnel, working with the children in our school district, we all need to take a deep breath, and we are very grateful and thankful for all that they are doing and what they have done. And I just appeal to everybody who gets that phone call just to take a deep breath and not take it out on our personnel who are trying to do the job that they've asked to be done. So, anything else that you want to bring up for discussion or board discussion?
Did we vote on the consent agenda?
I don't think we did. Did we? We have a first and a second. Did I take a roll call?
Did I not do that?
No, I didn't do it. I don't think so. We went from.
Yeah, we did.
Did we?
We did. Yeah, we voted.
Okay.
We did? Yeah, because that's
Well, it's
when,
only-
that's when
only-
I told Eric to go ahead and take the second.
All right, we got it. We got it.
Well, we made the, okay, I
we
didn't
just got-
remember
yeah,
we
then Mr.
voted.
Normally you
Hostler.
comment about it during that discussion, and I didn't say anything then, so I said it after mentioning
Glad
Mrs.
you did.
Stockwell, so
Oh,
that
that's
threw
right.
that threw it
I'm
off.
back there
Yeah,
now.
Glad
yeah,
you did.
I'm
yeah,
back.
That's my
Yep.
bad. So yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Anything else?
Just
I just want to make sure you're on your toes. I mean,
Okay, at this time, it is time for public participation again. On behalf of the board members, we'd like to invite anybody in the audience who would like to come up and talk to the board for 2 minutes.
Are we
on any
skipping 15?
Pardon?
Are we skipping 15?
Skipping
we
15?
thought we did that.
Yeah, we did it. You,
Oh,
unless
you have
have something to
something
bring
else.
up.
Well, no, I did want, I did want to know if you could give us an update, either Eric or Gretchen, on the subcommittee that was created on working on the CQ.
We're meeting on the
committee-
17th.
Meeting on the 17th, but that's not your first meeting, right?
It's our third, it'll be our
Third.
third meeting, yeah.
Third meeting.
Yeah, so
And
we're-
no resolution at this point, but we look forward to a very productive meeting on the 17th.
Okay, all right. I'm getting some feedback on making sure that the library page is challenged. And I have mixed feelings about this. I mean, whenever, having worked in my school libraries for almost all of my education career, to take out books that are there to read. If there's one like Stamped or White Fragility or something like that, that are clearly on the one side of the argument, could we not have a suggestion of a title that the group could put that is the counter proposal, so that both things are there for anybody to read? I would like to suggest that, because it seems pretty one-sided at this particular point. I would like to see some balance in the library that's being offered or recommended.
The one to the staff you're referring?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Anybody else? If I skip discussion too quickly, you're good?
I think so.
All right, this is the time for the public participation. Anything that did not appear on tonight's agenda, you have 2 minutes, and we ask again that you state your name, your address, and your group affiliation. So we have a sign-up slip here, and Kristen, I believe you're ready to go.
I was wondering if I can speak for 10 minutes.
Oh, you unfortunately only have 2 minutes.
It says on the policy that we can take 15, and someone took 2.5.
15 is actually the whole
max.
audience gets a total of 15.
Right,
Yeah,
and
but
it's-
that's not realistic.
As
So-
a citizen and coming here and waiting the whole entire time, and I know that I read early that you can actually speak 2 minutes at the beginning or 2 minutes at the end, and I've done this twice now, and you've put us through this, and it's
Well, it is a
It
board,
seems
it is a board meeting.
inconsiderate.
I understand, it is a board meeting, that we have a meeting that we have to conduct, and so we have two places that public can speak, and this is the second time on any agenda, a non-agenda item, so.
I believe at the last meeting I was at, people were given longer as
Excuse me.
well.
Before you talk, could you take the mic down? I can't hear you. Thank you.
Okay, I would.
That's something that we tried last time, but
Yep.
we were out of order. We cannot do that. Yeah,
Yep.
go ahead.
Well,
And
I'd
that
just
was
like to
my
say-
bad. That was my bad, because I thought that was something you could do, and it is not, according to Robert's rules. So 2 minutes, ma'am.
I feel slighted. I'd just like to say that, and I don't think that's really fair. I'm very upset, but maybe that is helpful for me. So this is way more than 2.5 minutes, so I'm upset about that, but here I go. So here I am, and I wanted to start out by saying, which will take probably
Excuse
30
me,
seconds.
can you state for the record
sorry.
your name and address?
My name is Kristen Razos, and I live at 563 Winding River Court. I'm here today, probably shouldn't read this because it'll take way too long, but here I go. To begin, though, I'd like to say, thanks to the many virtues of our school district, we have as a family experienced some pretty amazing moments, whether athletically, artistically, theatrically, musically, and linguistically, and let's not forget the many positive personal relationships that we've all forged, adults and students alike. I am and have been truly astounded by the mind-blowing talents of our students, and therefore, of course, our staff, teachers, administrators, and school board. So I'd like to begin with a heartfelt thank you and deep appreciation for myself and the entire Razos family. We lived in Perrysburg for 14 years. Skip ahead to the fact that I'm a caring mom, and I'm upset. I'm here today because what I've found over the course of being a mom at the high school for 11 years is that I've realized our children are expected to do more than is truly possible to accomplish. These expectations, coupled with perfectionism and judgment that is evidenced in the subtle and overt treatment of students, severely affects our children's view of themselves and of others. A culture of perfection and judgment is invisible and hard to define, but if we start to really think about it, it is very easy to see how incredibly powerful it is. It's used to get people to do what you want them to do, even if it's not healthy, because it's done with the idea that it's needed and it's beneficial. However, these emotions and tactics can push others to the point of self-destruction, as you all have been talking about, and I really appreciate that. But what I would like to say in general is that I've watched my children absolutely lose their ability to thrive in school. 2 of my children at times have pretty much given up on academics because it's impossible to be perfect, so why even try? One of my children was by all measures an exceptional student, achieved this level by doing things that are truly inhumane and at the very least unhealthy. School district conditioning and treatment by teachers was the motive for her drive and success, and if assignments were not complete, the students stayed home to do those assignments for fear of facing disapproval by her adoring teachers. This is only the tip of the iceberg as to how my children and family have unraveled due to the level of work that is expected of them and the pressure to be perfect that is never ending. What are we teaching our children when we are basically asking them to first do more than is humanly possible and second to do it for others and not themselves? How are we setting our children up to succeed in college with this kind of pressure and external reward system? I could go on, and I feel like I'm going to be cut off any minute now or any second, but I would like to say that I think that it's a culture issue that is all around the world, but especially in America, and we're doing a really good job of it here. And I feel like it's wonderful, but everybody needs to think about the things we're doing instead of implementing a couple psychologists. We need to think about how we're talking to our children. Should we be bringing up college in elementary school or in junior high? My daughter thought she was going to be homeless, and she would tell me that, and we thought it was goofy and funny because she's funny and goofy. And we're like, honey, you're not going to be homeless. She would stay up late with the lights on so she wouldn't fall asleep deeply. She constantly has wet hands, sweaty palms.
Excuse me, that is 2 minutes. Now, what you can do, once everybody else is done speaking, you may come back up, you get 2 more minutes, but you can't. They have the right now to speak.
Okay, thank you.
And feel
Gary?
free to email us. I mean, take
What
what
I
you
wanted
have
to
to
do was, my goal was to talk to people in the public so other parents can understand how they're not alone. And I only have a year and a half left here, and so it really isn't going to help us at all. And I love everybody and only want to do this for the good of everyone. I know I don't like the feeling of being here. This is the last thing I want to do, although I love talking. But so that's all I wanted to do, is make a presentation in the public for other people, because I feel people are suffering and they've told me so. And I think that the kids could do a lot better even than they're already doing, if that's the goal anyway, if we could just have some other things in place to not, make it overwhelming for them. Like, my kids can't get up in the morning, and that's the truth. I'm not lying, so.
Thank you. Carrie? C-A-R-E-Y, yep.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Thistlewaite. I live at 14848 Roachton Road. My husband and I have 4 children currently in the Perrysburg school system, 3 in high school and 1 in elementary school at Fort Meigs. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I would like to take my time to inform parents that the landscape of the public education system has changed, in so much that it has taken a keen interest in educating the whole child, defined specifically as mind, body, and spirit. Standards and resources of measure have been provided by the Ohio Department of Education in the area of social and emotional learning and are currently being integrated at the local level. Hence, the increased presence of counselors in the elementary classrooms, the creation of the Wellness Committee, addition of administrative positions, and the introduction of the Panorama Wellness Screener, a survey being administered to students beginning today, of which I have opted my children out. First and foremost, my husband and I believe that the responsibility of educating the whole of our children should remain with us, the parents, and we take full and complete ownership of doing so. We have employed the public school system to educate and assess our children in their core competencies of reading, writing, math, and science, not to judge whether or not they are meeting subjective, social, emotional, or cultural standards. We are not at all in disagreement that there is a need for everyone to grow and develop in these areas. We do, however, disagree with the psychoanalysis of any child by the educational system, despite the fact that the state and federal systems feel that it is necessary. The education system, Perrysburg included, has stepped into a fog of seemingly good-intentioned solutions for problems that lie deeper within the heart. As a result, I'm left to contemplate whether or not the public school system will continue to meet the needs of my children, if I will not have the ability to opt my child out of the SEL standards and measurements. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Mr. Corella?
We should go by height, so we don't have to keep moving the microphone. I'm Pete Corella, 2077 Lexington Drive in Perrysburg, parent of two daughters who went through kindergarten through 12th grade and on out into the world of work. One is a teacher, so I have a lot of respect for the teaching profession. I'm here to speak about an article taken from Perrysburg School District's CQ Virtual Library resource list. In this virtual library, there's an article from Johns Hopkins University entitled "Black Students Who Have One Black Teacher Are More Likely to Go to College." The article speaks to gaps in achievement, something that Tom was touching on before. The gaps in achievement between black and white students, and proposes some remedies. It cites a study that found having one black elementary school teacher not only makes a child more likely to graduate high school, it also makes them significantly more likely to enroll in college. Now, I don't know the specifics of this study, and I'm not going to challenge the validity of the study. I mean, who among us would not benefit from a positive role model, especially one that matches our own race and gender? I think that's wonderful. You know, it might even be more important. What I want to challenge is the article's conclusion. The article states, "It will take many years to recruit, train, and hire a significant number of black male teachers." They were primarily focused on black males in this article. So what do we do in the meantime? Well, the article says we need to educate white teachers about implicit bias, teach them to be culturally competent, and show them how not to exacerbate these existing achievement gaps. So the teachers are the problem. I don't think so. I think we have great teachers here in Perrysburg. But this is typical of the resources I find in the CQ Virtual Library. It assumes that either you are a racist or you just don't know it yet. What do we make of the performance of Asian students that are in our population? How many Asian teachers are in Perrysburg School District to act as role models? Does that seem to affect the performance of Asian students? In general, statistics show that Asian students do quite well in the absence of role models who happen to be Asian. So I think there's another answer. I think there are many other factors, I think we can agree, that go into educational achievement besides the classroom. Parental involvement and expectations. Do the students come from a two-parent home? The financial situation and standard of living for the family. Is education valued at home, and are they reading to the children?
Mr. Corral, that is 2 minutes.
So what's next? I want to live in a colorblind society. Using CQ and SEL to focus on a position that racism is the essence of America simply exaggerates our problems and deflects attention from the real issues in education. Thank you.
I can't read that. Laura, is it Laura? Woodview? Lives at 8 Woodview? Sorry, Tracy. Tracy?
Oh, they're close.
Laura.
Nowhere near, but that was close. My writing's not so great. Yeah, it's Tracy Ulrich at 8 Woodview. So I had something thingied out, but after our discussion just a little bit ago about the mental health, I find it very ironic that we're sitting here worried about this now when for the last year and a half, many of the parents I know, including myself, that has been our biggest concern. And you know what we were told? We're crazy. We're nuts. That mask isn't going to make these kids feel like that. Being behind plastic isn't going to make these kids feel depressed or sad. Really? Being home? All of the things that are affecting these kids are the mandates that this school district has put on the kids. And not just this school district, but the country. So now we're sitting here 18 months later going, what are we going to do? Why didn't people listen to us? Why couldn't anybody listen to us 18 months ago instead of looking at us like we're crazy because we know what is happening to our children? It infuriates me. Every day last year, my first grade granddaughter got off the bus in tears. I would have to hold her and rock her for an hour after getting off the bus coming from this school district. My 2 kids graduated from this school district. I was so excited that my granddaughter was going to have the same experience. She has not. She hates school. She has not had a good experience in 2nd grade. And it infuriates me. And you know what really infuriates me? Nobody seems to care now. Nobody seems to care what us parents think. I've had friends that have tried to opt their kids out of SEL. They get turned down. We've had friends try to do religious exemptions for their children. It gets turned down. How is that possible? Where did us parents lose control of what our kids get to do? Someone explain to me, because I would love to know, what is our rights as a parent in this school district? Do we have rights? Or are you all raising our children now? Thank you.
I believe that's all. Is there anybody else that did not sign in that wanted to get up and talk? Did you want to come back for 2 more minutes? Okay. Well, remember, we're not going to answer any questions. We're listening to what you have to say. We don't come back. And the fact is, I'd love to have discussions with a lot of you, one-on-one would be good to have, but this is not the time to do that. Go ahead.
Okay, hi again. I'm Kristen Radzos. Okay, so this doesn't have to do with COVID. This was a realization I had this past year. Anyway, so I'll just read this in order. I'm sharing this. Well, our students are awarded millions of dollars in scholarships, but I find that there's a hidden ailment we're creating as a culture that is not easily seen and certainly not shared openly with others. This hidden ailment that I'm speaking of is the breaking down of many of our students' nervous systems, leaving them feeling less than, not enough, which leads to a host of other physical and mental issues, family disharmony, ongoing anxiety that can turn into depression, eating disorders, etc., which could potentially carry with them the rest of their lives. I'm sharing this with everyone today because I feel in my heart it needs to be public so that others can understand that they are not alone. There should be no shame in the breakdowns that anyone is experiencing in their family. I'd humbly share that there is a shame in not standing up for our children who we have been and continue to be putting through the mill. And by that, putting through the mill is honestly putting it mildly. We can start to change this. As God is my witness, our family really hasn't had true peace in 7 years. Good days, of course, great days even, mental anguish, depression, family drama, etc. Certain children feeling above reproach by everyone as though that they are better, and others feeling as though they're not good enough. Is this really what is good for society? It sure isn't good for families, and most of all, it's really not good for our children. Healthy competition is great, unhealthy is not. Have we all considered following the setup/ideals of a truly successful school system such as Finland? We're great here, I know. Finland is the happiest place, or one of them on earth, and has one of the most successful schools on earth as well. We're not Finland, but we can take many strategies, ideas, and ideologies that Finland has and implement them here. My other question that I asked Mr. Hustler and Mr. Pullman, who were kind enough to meet with me recently, was in our yearly survey, do we ask students if they're having fun? How do they feel? Do we ask them if they stopped looking forward to going to school? We ask them if it's harder to get up in the morning? Do we keep tabs on our alumni was another question, not just the successful ones, but everyone. I remember working at Frank and a teacher said, oh, another.
That is 2 minutes.
Do I get 30 seconds more or just
You want to
2?
wrap up your...
Oh, okay. All right. My main thing I think right now is a lot of the homework, and I'm wondering who's monitoring that. And even if it's only 10 minutes, when you try to do something at whatever time, it always takes way longer. I know for myself it does. I have so much more to say, but I did bring the study. I left it here. It's 21 pages. 8 of them are the sources. I really feel it just was published, I think, in 2019, and I think that we would be ahead of the curve with the whole country if we started thinking about ways that we can, just do little things. That would be huge. And I can send this to people, but thanks for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? You want to speak to you want to speak to the board?
How do we create a two-way dialogue with you versus individual meetings or emails? Is that even a possibility?
Well, yeah, you can talk one-on-one with anybody anytime. You can call them. We can meet one-on-one, face-to-face. That's better than emails. You can meet with 2, but you can't meet with 3 board members.
I was told there's something there's considered like a town hall type thing.
No, there's never been a town hall. No, these are board meetings here, but certainly you can call any board member anytime and talk with them or meet with them. And I encourage that one-on-one, face-to-face, because you don't get a chance to hear emailing everything that we know. So that's how you can communicate. Call 2, not at 3, because we can't as a group meet at 3. Or you can call a superintendent, meet with Mr. Hostler.
I'd like to just throw in something here. If we would have a town hall and have an open forum, I mean,
Yeah,
that's a possibility, but it would have to be limited. You can't just say, okay, come throw everything.
This is for public, so you have to speak at the microphone so they can hear you. Because other. Well, we don't, but I don't want it to get into a forum here now, but this information for you.
I only had one more thing. Through my research, Perrysburg allows 2 minutes for parents to speak. The average is 3 minutes in Northwest Ohio. Some schools allow up to 5 to 7 minutes.
Some schools don't even have it, so go ahead.
Perrysburg only offers 2 minutes. It is very difficult in trying to make a concise point in 2 minutes. You have to talk like a maniac up here. I'm just asking, and then I will submit all my questions to you, but how would the board consider allowing parents at least the average of 3 minutes to speak? It makes a big difference when you're doing a presentation.
And I can respond to that. We gave 3 minutes to a group that came in for CRT, so we do make some adjustments to the board policy. But I will say that 3 minutes is not enough. I need a half hour of your time, you and me, face-to-face, one-on-one, so you can hear what's going on, or Mr. Corella, or any of the people, Mr. Bennington, or Mrs. Larimer. That's what you need, not emails, because the emails that you send with the questions you ask, we try to answer them, but then we don't get a response. I don't know if you even get the emails. So, thanks, I received the email, appreciate it. That's okay if you don't respond, but we don't know. So now we're, oh gosh, did I get enough information to her? Face-to-face is good. Emails, not so much, but we respect that when some people want to email that way. But we're trying their best. They're trying their very best to be transparent on everything.
I just think it would help you guys on social media if we had a forum where we could go back and forth, because the correct information and all the answers are, spot on, versus now I got to take away what this ESSER presentation was tonight and decipher all that with all the additional questions I have.
Sure, and I will tell you, give you a little bit of my information. We do not go on social media. We've been told very much by the folks when we go down to the Ohio School Board Association that we don't get involved with that.
Is that just the board, or are those your higher level administrators at your
No,
schools?
that is the board. That is me personally will not get on a web page or a Facebook page and give an opinion or a suggestion representing this board. But I would love, and I think they will too, to talk anytime, meet for coffee, talk over a situation, answer your questions. And we may have a difference, but they've been elected officials to get all the information to make a decision and vote. So we may be different, but that shouldn't divide us. But it does, and it has divided us, and it shouldn't.
You're absolutely right.
This school system is, as you see what we saw today in report, where Perrysburg is at financially and where Perrysburg is at with the scores. They work very hard in this district to educate the kids in the district. And the divisiveness with COVID and CRT and SEL, we've heard so much before this week or this month or this year on mental and social, emotional problems the kids were having. And I keep pointing that out with Mrs. Reddick, what she mentioned to us. We heard this 3 years ago. So it's not like all of a sudden we're paying attention to it. It's happened 3 years ago, and that's why we've hired staff, and that's why we've hired counselors and so forth to help take care of that. But I shouldn't be rambling on here because it's not a forum. But please reach out to any of the board members and to set up a meeting. If you want to meet with 3 or 4 of us, 3 or 4 of your
I
folks.
also want to throw in one thing here. I sat every Tuesday and every Thursday for 2 months. Tuesday at Panera, Thursday at Bob Evans. Nobody came. Nobody wanted to talk. People would go by me and they'd say hi.
Respectfully, I work. I work and I have kids. Like,
well, I started
at
it.
work. Like, I don't know when you were meeting people, but this is difficult. I've got 3 kids and 5 loads of laundry at home I could be doing. But
For point of order, I'd like to continue with our meeting and dismiss it or adjourn it, and then you can have a conversation. We can have a conversation out there, which would be appropriate with them. It would be best.
well, thank you for breaking the rules this time. It's greatly appreciated.
Is that a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Downs?
Yes.
Ms. Larimer?
Yes.
Mr. Bennington?
Yes.
Mr. Pullman?
Yes. Meeting adjourned.
Choked you up.
Didn't mean to squawk there.
Congratulations on your